Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the Capital Planning Committee meeting to order. By default, I'm going to chair tonight's meeting. We did have a meeting last week, which I think some of you are in attendance. I personally wasn't there, and there was a presentation on public building facilities use study. And just to go back a little bit further, the Capital Planning Committee was first established to take a look at, in one way, a 5-year plan, but to identify capital projects in town. And I think when we initially came out with a report, there was 95 projects that were identified for a total cost of $60 million. And one of the things, as many of you know, that has been discussed or kicked around is the possibility of new space for a town hall. So I know there was a discussion last week. There is, I think most of you are also aware that there is a citizens group that put on a non-binding referendum question on the ballot in May that will, I don't have it right in front of me, but it basically asks should the school committee and the capital planning committee study the consolidation. Again, it is non-binding, so regardless of the outcome of that, it doesn't compel anyone to do that. It's supposed to get a sense of the town. But tonight we're here, I believe, Mike, you and Scott, is that? Who's good? Kathleen, but I think the purpose is you're going to give a presentation on the educational impact of school consolidation. Is that correct? Oh, there you go. Phil, did you want to?
Just a quick question. Just to get a sense of who is here this evening, can we have a show of hands of folks that are school department employees? And then folks that are parents of children in the school system? Thank you.
David, did you want to open your meeting?
Yeah, we'll open our school committee meeting. Anybody want to make a motion to open? Motion by Ms. Peters to open the meeting, second by Mr. Hips. Mr. Hip, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you. And the school committee always opens their meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you could all rise, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much for coming this evening. I'm Kathleen Tyrrell. I'm the superintendent of schools, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak to the Capital Planning Committee, to the parents, to the school committee, and to the folks at home who may be watching this. I do have a PowerPoint presentation tonight, and we will have it posted on our website tomorrow. So for the people at home, you'll have access to it sometime tomorrow morning. I'd like to begin by introducing the members of the school committee who are here. Mr. David Conley, our chair. Ms. Stephanie Peters, our veteran school committee member. Mr. Eric Hipp, school committee member. And Michelle Lana, school committee member. Ms. Marion Hart regrets that she's unable to attend. She happens to be out of town. And tonight I'd also like to introduce the members of the school department administration that are here tonight that worked on this presentation. And I guess I'll just take you in the order that you're sitting. Or use this microphone here.
They won't be able to hear you on TV. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Scott Sevo, assistant principal at Hull High School. Scott, could you Mike Devine, principal of Hull High School. Judy Keene, assistant superintendent. Philippa Young, director of student services. Greg Kelly, assistant principal at Memorial School. Christine Capadonna, assistant principal at the Jacobs School. Jean Penta, principal of the Jacobs School. And Tony Rivnak, principal of the Memorial School. Thank you for your work on this presentation tonight. And I'm glad that you're here tonight also. And to all of our families that are here tonight, thank you and welcome. I was very pleased at the last meeting, and I want to thank Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Clinton for recognizing the progress of the school department and some of our successes. And that was very, very gratifying that you saw those things, that you pointed that out. And we're also very proud of our successes. You all know that just a little over a year ago, we were down in Washington, D.C., receiving a National Blue Ribbon for an exemplary improving school. The Jacobs School is now a level 1 school, and knock, knock, knock on that door, Memorial School won't be far behind. So that was very, very gratifying, And it was also reassuring to hear that a member of your committee, Doc Silva, and the town manager assured us that they do not want the schools to regress. So that made coming together tonight, it just put us in a better position where we're all looking at things together to see what's best for the town and what's best for school children. Tonight, I will try to make this presentation less than 3 hours in length. No. I plan to do this as expeditiously as possible, but there is quite a bit of material to cover. Our purpose, as outlined a week ago, is to present to the Capital Planning Committee and to the school committee what the school leadership believes the educational impact of school consolidation will be, what an impact that will have on the school children of Hull. As you know, at last Wednesday night, the town manager reported 4 areas of concern regarding school consolidation, and it was good to get those areas out. One was the space needs, legal issues, financial concerns, and of course, operational educational concerns. Tonight, the school department is looking at the educational issues. We're putting all those other issues in the caboose for tonight. Last week, Ms. Murray mentioned what schools were like before and having large classrooms, and I appreciated that, and that caused me to think that perhaps it would be helpful for us to make sure that everyone knows that schools are not like they were when we went to school. We have many mandates that when we were school children, we had never even heard of them. We have MCAS, the Massachusetts Comprehensive Assessment System. We now have PARC. This year, many of our students in each of the schools, selected randomly, will be trialing the PARC assessment. PARC is Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. The educational business does like jargons and acronyms. We do have all sorts of increased ongoing assessments, now dictated by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, are DDMs. Those are district-determined measures. We now have anti-bullying legislation. We have caused and we must educate suspended and excluded students. None of this was true in the past. We have to educate children in a sheltered immersion program who are English language learners. All of these things are good for students, don't get me wrong, but they're not the schools of the Damon School. It's not when people went to school out on Hog Island. This is quite different today. We're required to have 990 hours of instruction, thus eliminating study halls. Back when we went to school, we'd have study halls with up to 80 students in a study hall. Those are illegal now. We may not have study halls. So those 80 students would be dispersed today to 4 classrooms. That takes up space. We have, increased requirements for acceptance at all colleges and universities. When we went to college, when we were in high school applying to college, the schools that some of us might have considered safety schools are reach schools now. It's harder and harder for students to get into colleges. Some of this is the effect of the economy, but the state college and university systems are highly competitive now, and we want to position our students for success and acceptance. We have a legal requirement to educate all students with special needs between the ages of 3 and 22 in the least restrictive environment, which is the local public school whenever possible. When we went to school, that wasn't the case. Students that are educated in our public schools today were educated in outside placements back then at a far greater rate than they are today. Our schools now need computer labs. We have to have technology education. You all read about the STEM movement, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We have response to intervention. Response to intervention might just sound like another educational acronym, EdSpeak, so to say, but it's not. It's a regular education initiative mandated by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to support students so that special education may not be required for certain students. It's a proactive initiative. Rather than the old wait-to-fail model, this is a proactive model in part of regular education. That wasn't the case in the past. We now have to have dedicated spaces for speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, Title I academic support services. We need to have a substantially separate special education program within our schools. We have additional challenges. We have the Common Core. 45 states in the nation have signed on to that, onto these national standards. As I mentioned before, we're focused on college and career readiness. We have increased testing requirements. We have an increase in the low-income population of our students. That's increased 14% over the last 10 years. We have an increase in special education costs and requirements. We have increases in students, and this is not unique to Hull. We have increases in the students struggling with emotional and behavioral challenges. And today we need a foreign language lab. Otherwise, our students would be at a disadvantage when they took the AP foreign language exam, because that examination is given in a foreign language lab, and our students would have to take that exam elsewhere with no practice for it. Moving on, the Capital Planning Committee last week recommended the following grade configuration: the Jacobs Elementary School, pre-K through 6, and Hull High School, 7 through 12.
It wasn't recommended, it was considered.
I'd like to, pardon me? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, but we didn't make that recommendation. We just put it out there as a consideration.
I'll change that slide before
Okay,
we put it up.
thank you.
That's a good point. Thank you. Recommended for consideration. Does that work? Okay, good. Thank you.
Well, excuse me, I would call that a possibility. It wasn't discussed, it wasn't voted on, it wasn't recommended by the Capital Planning Committee.
Oh, we didn't
so-
realize that. We thought you had voted on that. So thanks for that clarification, too. Okay, in contrast, though, based upon space availability, the school leadership has reached a very different conclusion to that possibility. We believe that if building consolidation does occur, it will result in the following grade configuration: pre-K through 7 at the Jacobs Elementary School, and at Hull High School, grades 8 through 12. At this point in time, I've asked some of the school administrators, I've asked Mr. Scott Sevo and Mr. Devine to talk about the impact on students. Mr. Sevo? You're welcome.
What did I just do? I'd like to first off thank the committee for having us here today, and especially having me here to speak. I'm going to start tonight in the spirit of full disclosure, and that is that I started my career as an educator as a middle school educator. I was a 7th grade social studies teacher in an underperforming district in North Carolina, and I believe in the middle school concept and the necessity not only for a middle school facility, but staffing and programming specifically tailored to the needs of 11 to 14-year-olds. Grades 6 through 8 constitute a unique period of academic, physical, and social emotional growth for our students. Brain research over the past 2 decades tells us that the growth and development of the frontal lobe of the brain that occurs at the onset of adolescence, that spike in growth is what controls our ability to inhibit our impulses, to regulate our emotions, and to plan and organize our behaviors. Middle school provides a necessary bridge for our students, a necessary bridge from the self-contained, highly structured elementary environment to the more independent high school environment. And so throughout this presentation, you're going to hear me refer to that over and over again, about how middle school is necessary to bridge the gap between the elementary experience and the high school experience. It was my great pleasure to be here last Wednesday and hear the presentation of the committee. I believe they did an excellent job of capturing quite clearly the difficult economic realities the town is facing at this time. But I think the greatest takeaway I had from the committee's reassurances was that this is not a school versus town issue. This is our issue, and we're working on it together. During their spirited debate at the beginning of the meeting, there was mention of who had the most skin in the game, and that was the quote that was thrown out there. What I challenge you to consider this evening is that the group with the most skin in the game are our students. They are possibly the neediest, most vulnerable, most at-risk citizens in the town of Hull. The proposed solution, if it were to go forward as currently constituted, students age 11 to 4 would bear the brunt of some of these economic hardships, with the loss of an educational experience that's appropriate and tailored to their specific developmental needs. Schools are more than just physical spaces. They're living, breathing organisms. They're built specifically to support the unique needs of our students that we serve, and it's our belief that any plan predicated just on space rather than the needs of our students constitutes an educational step backward for our students, their families, and our town. When we look at the loss of the middle school or the consolidation of schools, we have to talk about the middle school concept and what middle school means to our students, and a lot of that has to do with the development that they're going through at that period. By losing the middle school, we would lose the full capacity to meet the following challenges that our students face. Our students are facing a rapid biological growth and development. They have physical and emotional changes that impact their learning every day. And these changes can be confusing and embarrassing. And we need the proper supports for our students who are going through this. It is difficult enough to be a 13-year-old student in the 8th grade. It is more difficult to be a 13-year-old student going through these changes with 18, 19, and 20-year-olds in your learning community. One of the other bridges that we have to build for our students in the middle school is the transition from standards-based to performance-based curriculum and assessment. In the elementary school, students are assessed against a standard. Students are either approaching that standard, they've met that standard, or they've exceeded that standard. What we're moving them towards is the high school model where students are really being compared against one another. And middle school helps us bridge that gap by changing the report cards. If you just look at a report card, you'll see that in the middle school, students start receiving A's, B's, and C's and can compare my progress versus another student. They start to join the Middle School National Honor Society. They start to take Ready Step tests that prepare them for the PSAT and the SAT. And it signals a change in the way our students are being assessed and the way that our curriculum is being designed. Again, the third point here is a transition from highly structured and self-contained learning environment at the elementary level to the independent learning environment that you would experience here at Hull High School. And this is one of the most dramatic changes. An elementary student has my classroom and my teacher, and they're in a heterogeneous environment with different students of different ability levels. When you transition, by the time you get to high school, you need to experience a transition to a world where you are on your own. You're dictating your own schedule. You're deciding what are your likes and your interests, and that's driving your decision making. You do not have a teacher, you have a group of teachers who you need to adapt to. You do not have a classroom, you have a number of classrooms with different expectations. And that's what the middle school does. It helps bring our students from one level to the other. We talk about the dramatic increase in complexity of interpersonal relationships with our students. Middle school is a place that creates a safe environment for our students to talk about things such as dating, bullying, recognizing one's own sexuality, peer pressure, destructive decision making. These are all topics that are ingrained into middle school curriculums, and specialists and support staff at the middle school are trained to deal with these issues that are facing students in this age group. Age-appropriate environment to practice the skills necessary for positive peer interactions, that's what the middle school does. Your first dances might have been in the middle school. Your first athletic team, if you were at a middle school that had athletics, where you learn the concept of teamwork. MASPER programs like we have at the middle school, after-school music, yearbook, Middle School National Honor Society. It's the first time that we're creating these environments for our students where they can start to individually explore their own interests, where they can work as teammates, where they can start to take those steps of maturation that are so important for this age group. And I think the thing that we can't lose sight of in the loss of the middle school is the loss of an entire school community. My charge here at the high school, a lot of it is about climate and culture of this building, and it's difficult. We have to work at it all the time to try to make our students feel like they're a part of something, and this is something that they're proud of, that they want to come to Hull High School, and they're proud to say they're from Hull High School. What will be the identity for these students as they're dispersed to these different schools, placed where they fit, based on space, the climate and culture of the building, the sense of belonging, their self-esteem and their self-image, which is so important for these students. We feel that the loss of the middle school will signal a loss of the appropriate supports for these students. It will be the loss of small, safe communities for our students, 6th graders with 6th graders, 7th graders with 7th graders, 8th graders with 8th graders. We'll lose that dynamic. Once again, it's hard enough being a 13-year-old. Do we need to make the challenges more daunting for these students? Transitioning from the developmental needs of our students to the more kind of physical and programmatic needs of our students. And I'm going to be concentrating on the pre-K to 7 students, where Mr. Devine is going to be talking specifically about 8 through 12. One thing that we're facing in our curriculum is national standards for science that are coming our way. And we know they're coming our way, and we know what they are. They're in the process of being adopted. They're called the Next Generation Science Standards. And what they tell us our students need to be doing is they mandate that we focus on inquiry-based learning, that we focus on hands-on experience for our students in science, which include formal science labs and teacher demonstrations. With a lack of science labs not available for 6th and 7th grade students, it will be impossible to meet the needs of these next generation science standards. Less access to computer labs. We have made great strides in technology in our district in my time here, and we're all very proud of what's been accomplished. The one-to-one movement is changing education. The idea, one student, one piece of technology, one piece of learning technology. And in the middle school, this concept has really changed the game. But what we need to keep our eye on is that iPads or tablets are not computers. There are still needs for computers for our students and full computer labs. Microsoft Office, for example. If any of you would try to recreate this PowerPoint on your iPad, good luck. If you know how to do it, please tell me, because I struggle. If you look at the engineering program, the engineering and technology program at the middle school, and the specific software that's used by Brendan Sullivan, the teacher at the middle school, if you can find a way to provide that without computer labs, that would be helpful. But iPads at this point and tablets do not fully replace the need for our computer labs. In the Jacob School, there are 2 full computer labs. One of those computer labs is a classroom used to teach technology. If we were to add 6th and 7th grade students to the needs that are already there from pre-K to 5, you can imagine the scheduling of one open computer lab for teachers to bring their classes. Specialized reading instructional space. Reading instruction needs to take place in specialized space. It needs to protect the dignity of our struggling readers. Currently at the Jacob School, an educational approach known as flooding goes on, where teachers are allowed to homogeneously group their readers by skill level, take them away from the normal classroom environment and take them into some of those extra spaces that are currently in the Jacob School and give them direct instruction at the level that they find themselves as a reader. Those types of opportunities, if those classrooms were taken by the 6th and 7th grade, would not be there. On top of that, individual reading instruction needs to go on in dedicated spaces, which would be limited or in short supply with the current consolidation plan. Team-based learning. Team-based learning is a specialized program for students with severe and moderate disabilities who were previously tuitioned to out-of-district placements. Under the leadership of Judy Keene and now under the leadership of Philippa Young, our district has made great strides in bringing students who would normally be educated in out-of-district placements back here into Hull. Priority number 1, or the reason we're doing that, is because it's the right thing to do. It's our mandate to educate our students in the least restrictive environment, and as the superintendent clearly stated, that's that's here in our town and in our schools. The second cause for this movement is the costs. Out-of-district placements are very expensive. We all know as we go through the budgeting process how rapidly the picture and the landscape can change when out-of-district placements become something that the district has to deal with. And so by providing spaces for TBL programs at the elementary school, middle school, and high school, we've been able to bring these students back. We've been able to educate them in our buildings, and it's been great for the climate and the culture of our school. Talking to Mrs. Penta about what it would look like at the Jacob School if some of this TBL space, the extra space that they have, would be taken away. One of the issues is that there are often behaviors with these students that are disruptive to the learning environment. And those extra spaces are used as a place where you can bring a student to de-escalate and to process those behaviors. If we don't have those spaces, the danger is that these processes could take place in public spaces, in hallways, throughout the building. And that is not only disruptive to the students in the TBL program, but disruptive to students all throughout the building. The loss of technology and engineering space, leading to the loss of the pre-engineering education for students in 6th and 7th grades. Currently at the Memorial Middle School, there's a program that has really changed the game for them when it comes to technology education. They have moved from a 1980s style typing, word processing, Microsoft Word program, internet exploration program, to a program that's really based on the engineering model. 6th grade students learn to navigate the design process from idea to prototype to production and even sale of their product. 7th grade students concentrate on the concept of transportation. 8th graders are experiencing the basics of civil engineering. This is necessary for our students to move from this pre-engineering program to the SHOT program that we're looking to build here at Hull High School. Losing that space in the Memorial Middle School would make it so this program would no longer exist. We're going to have the loss of large group spaces for interdisciplinary teaching and learning. Part of the middle school model, as we all know, is that students are teamed together. And that core group of teachers work together to better serve those students in a safe environment. And I think we talk about it often, and we think about it as common planning time, teachers sitting together and working together. But what we lose in that is that there's common instructional time, that there is a value to having your 80, 85, 7th, 8th graders in a room together being educated at one time, being able to make presentations, the teachers as a team being able to make presentations to the entire group. The student-centered learning that can go on in that type of environment. By moving our students out of the Memorial Middle School, those large spaces for those groups will no longer exist. When we talk about unified arts at the middle school, one of the things that Mr. Devine and I are talking about this is that unified arts is so important to the middle school concept because the idea is we want students to be able to get a little taste of everything that's out there. It's mandatory in the middle school that students experience the arts, that they experience music, that they experience technology and physical education. It's part of that defining of themselves, who they are, finding where their interests are. The dangers for these programs, if we consolidate as has been suggested, some of the art classes, because there was only one dedicated art space in the Jacobs Elementary School, some of that art would have to be art on a cart. We'd have teachers moving from room to room into classrooms to hold their art classes. Many general music classes will not be held in sound muffling rooms due to band and chorus occupying the dedicated music classroom. If 6th grade and 7th grade chorus and band are to go on as they have previously gone on, they will have the need to use the music room, the dedicated music room. They cannot use the auditorium as they do in the Memorial Middle School because it also serves as a cafeteria. So what you would find is general music classes, again, happening in the regular classroom. Physical education classes would not be able to have dedicated gym space. They would be sharing of the gym area, and the age groups could range anywhere from 5- and 6-year-olds to 11- and 12-year-olds. Field use for the 6th and 7th grade physical education classes will be limited by recess at the Jacobs Elementary School. If you take pre-K through 5, recess is consumes almost the entire day in the sense that there's a different group accessing the playground and the fields. For 6th and 7th graders to get out, to have their physical education in the Jacobs School, on the Jacobs School field would certainly have restrictions, or the schedule would restrict that. No spaces for middle school students to change into proper clothes for physical education classes. We talk about this often. There's an issue of no showers. Do most of our students shower? No. We're going to be honest with you. Middle school students, they do not. But again, when we go back to some of those developmental needs, to the changing body, to the insecurity that comes with being a 12- and 13-year-old, what does that look like in a gym without locker rooms? What does that look like when the student needs to put on deodorant, needs to clean themselves up, when there's a class with 11- and 12-year-olds and a class with 6- and 7-year-olds in the same gymnasium? So the physical education program will certainly look different. I think if you polled parents at the elementary school and you asked them where their concerns lie for their students, for their younger students, it would be here on this slide. It would be about the inability for us to physically separate grade 6 and 7 students from their elementary students. The Jacobs School was not built to separate these age groups. And therefore, whatever this were to look like, however the setup of the rooms were to be, there's going to be daily interaction between possibly 5 and 13-year-olds. And we know that's not a classroom issue at the Jacob School, but it would be an issue on the buses, in the bathrooms, in the cafeteria, and in the hallways, which are the areas that as educators we need to supervise because the areas where things can happen. And having 5-year-olds and 13-year-olds sharing a seat on the bus, the conversations that may go on, is not something I think that most of us would want our young children exposed to. There is a reason that these age groups are separated. Increased behavioral concerns due to increased population with different developmental needs. I know that our discipline system at the high school is specifically set up to meet the needs of 9th through 12th graders. And we treat those students differently based on their developmental needs. How would discipline look at the Jacobs Elementary School for a 7th grader versus a 5th grader versus a 3rd grader? There are differing needs, there are differing issues, and it would certainly be a stress on that system to maintain the behavior that's appropriate for a positive learning environment. So with that, I'm going to turn over the rest of the presentation to Mr. Devine.
Would it be helpful, do you want the PowerPoint now or on the way out? Now? I'll pass them out now.
Well, Dr. Tyrrell and a few others are passing the PowerPoint presentation out, I would like to just start by saying this. I consider myself a very lucky man. I love the fact that I get to drive into this community every day. I love the fact that I get to come to this school every day. When I first started here, almost 5 years ago, people would ask me, oh, I hear you're going to be a principal. Where are you going? I'd say Hull, and they'd say, why? Now, when people ask me where I'm a principal, and I tell them I'm a principal of Hull High School, they say, hey, we're here. There's good things going on down there. Mm-hmm. And it's not me. It's not Mr. Sevo. I am so proud of what our students and teachers have accomplished together. And the fact of the matter is, if, God forbid, something happened to the Memorial Middle School, we could cram the 8th grade in here. That's what it would be. It would be cramming them in here. We'd get through it. But it would be a gigantic step backwards for our school and for our school community. Dr. Tyrrell mentioned a couple things about, increased mandates. If you go back 10 years ago to getting to UMass Amherst, you needed 4 years of English, you needed 3 years of math, you needed 3 years of a science, said nothing about science with a lab. The minimum GPA requirement was a 1.5. UMass Amherst, the requirements, the entire UMass system, the requirements now are a 2.0 GPA. If you don't have it, you're not getting in. 4 years of English, 4 years of math, 4 years of a science with a lab. Our elite universities, if you don't have 4 years of a foreign language, you're not a competitive candidate. They tell us over and over again for our elite universities, what do you need in order to be accepted? AP courses. Talk to any college admissions counselor, talk to any parent or student who's gone through the admissions process lately. It's very different than it was when we were students. The curriculum, the fact of the matter is, the curriculum that is now taught at Hull High School that we are required to teach is more rigorous than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. We now not only have to educate our students, we have to be able to demonstrate in their freshman year, their sophomore year, and pretty soon their junior year, that they have achieved college and career readiness. I offer you a challenge. If you go on Google and you type in PARC, sample questions, take a look at some of those questions that our 10th graders and 11th graders are going to have to answer. I'll tell you, they're not easy. And it requires more time, more instruction, and more specially designed instruction for our students. So what would the impact of students in grades 9 through 12 be if the 8th grade came up here in this, grade 8 through 12? We have science labs. We have 5 beautiful science labs. And we have 5 science teachers teaching 4 years of science to every student that graduates from Hull High School. There are labs, there are demonstrations. It would be very, very difficult for us to say to a science teacher, okay, set up your demo, and now it's your prep period. So you're going to leave your classroom, break down your demo so an 8th grade teacher can come in and set up their demo. Oh, by the way, you have 3 minutes passing time. And then when you come back, set up your demo again to keep going. All right, so we would have to be saying to the 8th grade science teachers, I'm sorry, but the labs have to be dedicated to the high school students. Mr. Sevo mentioned about a lack of space for students to attend specialists, art, music, computer, and physical education. The fact of the matter is, you know, you may hear talk about where there's space. There are no empty rooms at Hull High School. Every single room at Hull High School is used every single day. We even have some offices that are now used as classrooms. For example, what used to be a counselor's office is now used for that sheltered immersion for our English language students. We have 3 students who are considered English language learners, which means English is not their first language. It means that when they are tested by the state, they have not achieved English proficiency. We are required by law to give them sheltered instruction. We have our school psychologist's office. She is here 2 days a week. When she is not here, that's used for therapeutic groups, that's used for speech therapy, that's used for counseling, that's used for testing. The conference room next to my office is often used for therapeutic groups. I leave my office because I really don't want to hear what they're discussing in their therapeutic groups. I think it's a violation of their privacy. So the shop, though it was closed, is now open. It's booming. I love the fact that I walk down the hallway and on one side of me I'm hearing music being played, and on the other side I'm hearing a bandsaw. They're beautiful sounds. When the shop was built, it was built to have a wood shop, a computer lab, and a metal shop. The wood shop is fully up and functioning. That middle section is used as a classroom. We don't have a CAD lab in there. But I tell you, it's one of those things we need to keep working on, because our students that go to engineering programs, pre-engineering programs, or architecture programs, it is assumed by the colleges that they know how to use computer-assisted drafting. So we don't have the space. And again, up here, we could make it work. It would be a step backwards. The specialists, again, we have a music room. It's used 6 periods a day. So the 8th grade would not be able to fully access that as well. Physical education, same thing. Computers, you know, you talk about the differences between now and 10 years ago. If you talk to our recent graduates, it is assumed when they go to college that they know how to use Google Docs. It is assumed that they know how to do some independent online virtual learning. Most of our students, in addition to going to class, they take hybrid classes, which part of the learning takes place in the classroom, part of it takes place on the computer. It's assumed that they know how to do it. Colleges don't teach kids how to use Google Docs. Colleges don't teach students how to do a PowerPoint presentation. It is assumed when they get there they know how to do that. We need computer space to do that. And we need a lot of time in the computer rooms in order to make that happen. Excuse me. Our advisory program. Now, advisory program is something that a lot of people look at and say, oh, you know, building community, that's nice and everything, but what does that have to do with education? Advisory program started shortly after Columbine High School, the events of Columbine High School. The Secret Service commissioned a study of school shootings in America up to that point. And the common denominator was that in the schools where there were school shootings, the kids reported, we do not have an adult that we have a special connection with. In the schools where there were almost school shootings, every single time a school shooting was stopped, it was that a student went to an adult, a trusted adult in the building, and said, I got to tell you what I'm hearing. Marshfield High School, several years ago, it was a school resource officer that prevented a tragedy from happening at Marshfield High School. What the advisory program does is it gives our students an opportunity to make a connection with an adult in the building who they probably do not have as a teacher, so there are none of those academic requirements and, hey, you didn't do your homework. It's let's sit down, let's talk, let's figure out where you're moving with your life, and let's build a relationship. The fact of the matter, it's also a NEASC requirement. NEASC absolutely has said you must have an advisory program. That program would be decimated because of lack of space. We would not have the space to make sure 8th graders had a place to go for that program. Necessary gym space. The gym is used 7 periods a day, and it is a crowded place, 7 periods a day. I do not know how we would be able to fit in 8th grade physical education. I don't know how we would do it. Again, Dr. Tiro mentioned about no study halls. Our students are in classes 7 periods a day. 7 periods a day in a class. Not a single student has a study hall. There are 12 seniors right now who have a privilege known as the senior study hall because they have a 3.0 GPA. They've made the honor roll both terms this year and have no behavioral problems. And we set that up to kind of get them ready, saying, well, you know, in 6 months, you're going to have a little bit more freedom than you have here at Hull High School to get them ready. So there are 12 students that have a senior study. But because of that, we need spaces to put the kids 7 periods a day. I can't put 75 students in the cafeteria and say, go nuts, do some studying. I have to have them with a teacher 7 periods a day, 7:25 to 2:10. Reduction in special education resource space. Scott talked about that. Our students now, if a student is in an evaluation for special education, you can plan on that student's doing about 5 hours of testing, at least, to figure out whether or not the student has a disability. There needs to be a private place to do that. Just the fact. It's not like you're going to test a kid in the hallway. The team-based learning Scott talked about also. We currently have in place a program for our students with moderate to severe disabilities that we're working with them 14 to 18 years old. And really the focus of that is academics with life skills. You know, how do you make change? How do you use a clock? If you get lost in Hull, how do you get home? But we are required by law for students who have severe to moderate disabilities, they are our financial responsibility until they are 22 years old or accept a high school diploma, whichever comes first. We have students in the schools now who will be our responsibility until they're 22 years old. We are going to need spaces to teach them how to live independently. We're going to need the resources to get them jobs and internships. All right, so that's another area where we're going to need some space. My first 3 years as a teacher, I shared a classroom. I worked at Hanover High School. I didn't have my own classroom. I had a bag, and I had a cart. And what would happen is, and this is, we have 2 teachers in the high school, one teacher who's doing it full-time, one teacher who's doing it part-time, who share classrooms. Tell you the story of Miss Cowan. Miss Cowan is a second-year teacher. It's her first year here at Hull High School. She starts the morning in a classroom on the first floor. She has her in-focus projector on a cart. She has her laptop on a cart. She has her books in the bottom of the cart, the students' paper, the textbooks, the worksheets, the folders, everything she needs for her class. She teaches the class, the bell rings. She has 3 minutes to get to her next class. It's just down the hall, no problem. But now she gets there, she has to set up her laptop. She has to set up her in-focus projector. She has to get all the stuff. She has to go to the board. When we were in school, you would go to class, and the expectation was you would sit in your seat, and when the bell rang, maybe the teacher would start teaching, but they'd probably be taking attendance, and then there'd be some dead time, and we'd talk and things like that. Our teachers, we say to our teachers, there needs to be something on the board, an activator, a do now. The second those kids walk in the room, they need to sit in their seats, they need to start working. Miss Cowan gets to her classroom. She says to the teacher whose room she's sharing, "Can I erase this?" And oftentimes the teacher goes, "Really?" Miss Cowan erases it, she puts up her do now, or she projects it on the screen after she gets everything set up. She teaches her class, and then she does it all over again. And it's difficult enough for our students to get class to class in 3 minutes. Imagine doing it in a crowded hallway, pushing a cart down to try and get to your class. I will tell, this may not seem like a big deal. I will tell you, in my opinion, that the greatest negative impact that having middle school students up at the high school would be teachers sharing classrooms. It's not that they're bad sharers. Teachers are good sharers. But it hinders the educational process. There's no question about it. As I said, my first few years as a teacher, I shared a classroom. When I got my own classroom, I became a better teacher. There's no question. My students had a better educational experience. Mr. Sevo also talked about in the elementary school about the daily interactions. Well, if we have 13-year-olds up here, we have 19-year-olds up here, we cannot segregate them. The building is not built in a way that we can segregate the middle school students from the high school students. I've heard people say, there are middle high schools all over the place. You're absolutely right. There's one right next door. Cohasset has one. And those middle school students never interact with the high school students. It doesn't happen. It's 2 different buildings under one roof. Abington's building a new school, a new middle high school. They have spent a great deal of time and money making sure that those 7th graders do not have contact with the seniors for a lot of good reasons. We cannot do that in our building. We have upstairs and downstairs. That's it. I can't close off the upstairs for the 8th grade. I can't close off the upstairs for the high school. We can't do it without those students seeing each other every day, classrooms, hallways, bathrooms, cafeteria, library. We can't do it. Some district-wide impacts I want to talk about. We currently have 7 classrooms across the district devoted to the South Shore Educational Collaborative. We belong to the collaborative. There are 10 communities that belong to the collaborative, and the greatest thing that they do for us is provide services that we cannot provide. We have many of our students who go to the Hingham, not many, we have students who go to the Hingham facility, and we have students, our students, who come here in a South Shore Collaborative program. The South Shore Collaborative teachers, they're not our teachers. Our kids are tuitioned. We pay for them to be a part of the South Shore Collaborative, but they use 7 of our classrooms as their classrooms. And as you can see, by giving them the classrooms, they're not free. We make about $34,000 for the district by having them here. But as Scott said, there's the financial positive. It's also the right thing to do. If you live in Hull, just because you have severe disabilities doesn't mean you should have to, sit on a bus every day and go to Hingham. They have the opportunity to come here. We have 4 at the Jacobs Elementary School, 2 at the Memorial Middle School, and 1 classroom up here. And again, if we had to send them, we have 6 of our own Hull students who are part of those programs. If we had to send them out of district, again, we would still be paying the tuition. I don't want to be disingenuous about that. We would still be paying a tuition, but we'd also be paying a transportation cost of about $75,000 annually for those students. And that number varies year to year depending on the needs of the students, the numbers of the students. So when you look at the whole kit and caboodle about the South Shore Educational Collaborative and our relationship, our students and having the space, it's about a $109,000 swing when it comes to tuitions, transportation, and spaces. By belonging to the collaborative, there are other positives. If you're a Hull Public School student and you're in a collaborative building here in our schools, you have a greater likelihood of transitioning back to our schools. Because we can do things like you're in the collaborative 6 periods a day, but 1 period a day you're going to be in a Hull High School classroom with Hull High School students. We're going to transition you, kind of get you back, because the goal is to educate our students in our schools. Again, our students should be able to go to school with their peers. It doesn't matter that they have a severe disability or a moderate disability. We shouldn't be saying to them, oh, that person who's been your neighbor since you were 5 years old, you don't get to go to school with them. You're going to Hingham. You're going to Cohasset. No, they should be able to go to school with their own peers. They sometimes are able to participate in our classes, our physical education, our arts, music classes. The team-based learning students, our students with moderate to severe disabilities who we are doing our best to provide an education to, they also sometimes get to use the collaborative services. As you can see up there, some different things. And one of the great things about Hull High School having the collaborative up here is we have 7 students who every day spend 1 period a day with the South Shore Educational Collaborative, working with students with moderate to severe disabilities. I can tell you there's a parent of somebody in the room who, if you asked her daughter would tell you that that 1 period a day she spent working with the severely disabled children last year was the best period of her entire school career. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
All right. Not to call out who it is. Okay? So it's great for them to have those. If we didn't have the program, we wouldn't be able to have those opportunities. There's also new legislation Dr. Tyrrell referred to before. It used to be in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, if a student was suspended, if a student was expelled, if a student was excluded, which is a suspension of more than 10 days, sorry, bye, stay at home, see you when you come back. Oh, by the way, you're going to have a lot of makeup work to do when you get back. Starting this September, if we suspend a student, exclude a student, expel a student, we need to continue to educate that student. They need to be in school, in a classroom, with a teacher every single day. Now, if we've said to a student at the high school, what you did is so bad, we're telling you you can't be at Hull High School, oh, but come on back to Hull High School, we'll teach you here because we have to, it sends a horrible message. We have to have a place where we can educate these students in a safe environment to meet the requirements of the law. Another regulation that definitely impacts us is the substantially separate special education program. I cannot put an 8th grader in the same separate program with a senior. I'd be breaking the law. 48 months. There can only be a 48-month difference between the youngest person in the room and the oldest person in the room. Do the math. If I have an 8th grader up here, I cannot have them with a junior. I cannot have them with a senior. We're talking additional programs. We're talking additional rooms that we would have to provide, or else we would be breaking the law. You know, when I first got here in 2009, it was right when there were some pretty horrible decisions that had to be made about public education here in Hull. Middle school lost foreign language. We lost quite a few teachers. Social studies teachers were gone, with social studies now being taught by uncertified teachers who are not certified in social studies. They're certified in their subject matter, but not social studies. We want to bring those programs back. If the 8th graders up here, if the 6th and 7th graders down at the Jacobs Elementary School, the chances of these programs coming back are slim to none. So what? So the 8th graders don't get to take foreign language. Well, just about every community you're going to find, foreign language starts in 7th grade. Spanish, for example. Students do Spanish 1 in 7th and 8th grade. When they're freshmen, they do Spanish 2. By the time they're seniors, they have the opportunity to do AP Spanish. Outstanding. Great. By starting in 9th grade, we're saying our students in Hull do not have the opportunity to do AP Spanish. Can't do it. Every other surrounding town, they do. Our students don't. Middle school social studies. I'm somebody who believes that in the best case scenario, the teacher who's in front of the room, whatever they are teaching students, they should know that material cold. I am a history teacher. I know my history. You put me in a math classroom, that's not going to be good, right? And I would say the same thing. A math teacher teaching history is not ideal. It's not ideal at all. Decrease in availability of technology, we've talked about that. The other thing I would say is 5 years ago when we stood before you and did the 21st century school plan, nowhere in that plan are tablets mentioned. iPods did not exist. Nowhere in there is it mentioned college and career readiness, PARC. Nowhere is it mentioned sheltered immersion. Nowhere is it mentioned about many of the things we've just talked about. And I can't predict the future, but if I was a betting man, I would be willing to bet that sometime in the next few years, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is going to come up with something else that they're telling us we need to do. And if we are crammed into the two buildings, there's a definite chance that we will have to say, we cannot do what you're telling us to do, Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed. We just don't have the space. They're going to look at us and say, too bad, figure it out. A couple other issues to consider, and I'm really not going to talk about these because we said we were really going to focus on the space needs and on the educational impact. But in our talking and our brainstorming, there are some other issues that we would ask the Capital Planning Committee and the people in the room to consider as we go through this process. Additional buses will be required. No question. Additional lunch periods will be required. You can't cram everybody into the cafeteria. And the fact of the matter is, at the Jacobs School, at the high school, and at the middle school, lunches started about 11 o'clock. Lunches ended about 1 o'clock. If we have to add extra lunches, you're either starting at 10:30 or you're starting at 1 o'clock. And if you've ever worked with 8th graders, telling an 8th grader they need to wait until 1 o'clock for lunch is dangerous. So people need to eat. Age-appropriate bathrooms. I don't know. Are the bathrooms age-appropriate for the students? Parking and its impact on neighbors and commuters. We have a parking crunch. I don't know what the reaction would be of the neighbors up on Harborview if we took more space, if we had more cars up there. I can imagine what the reaction of the commuters would be if we started having more people parking across the street. Lockers. There are no lockers at the Jacobs Elementary School. That's something that would need to be looked at. The ability to attract and retain talented faculty and staff. It's very difficult to get talented staff to come to Hull because of our location. If we then add to that a perception of only 2 schools, is it going to be harder? The impact on student migration, I think we need to take a look at what's going to happen. We need to be talking to parents, excuse me, of younger students and asking them, if there are 2 schools, does that make you more likely to send your child to a private school or a charter school? Something to think about. Cost of technology upgrades. The middle school, one-to-one. Great, the students have the iPads. Without the wireless capabilities in the middle school, those iPads aren't doing a whole lot. If the 6th and 7th graders go up to the Jacobs Elementary School with their iPads, we're going to need to provide a whole lot more wireless, and that's going to be very expensive. The MSBA financial impact of using the school for something other than a school, and the impact on real estate values. And again, I can't speak to any of these things, but they are things I think that need to be considered by the committee when looking at the issue. So in summary, we conclude that consolidation, it's going to have a substantially negative impact on the education received by our students. I'll say it again. Could we do it if we had to? Yes. Is it taking a step backwards? Yes. Is the quality of the education, if this building were an 8 through 12 building, is that the same quality of education as a 9 through 12 building? Absolutely, 100% no. The quality of students' education diminished. The school's ability to address the social and emotional needs of Hull students would be compromised. Again, our students have a significant amount of social emotional issues. It's increasing everywhere. All right, students are, it's a tough time to be a high school student. There's more depression than ever before, more anxiety, more school phobia, more mental illness. It's happening across the board. We need the space for that. So therefore, we do not feel, as the school leadership, we do not feel it's in the best interest of the children of Hull to consolidate the schools for the reasons that we've laid out tonight. And I hope that as we talk about this, and, you know, absolutely, you know, open up the floor for questions from the committee, and then if the committee chooses from the audience. As educators, we do not feel it's the right thing to do. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Terrell, Mr. Devine, and Mr. Sevo for your presentation. First, I'll open it up. Questions from the committee? Anyone?
I got a couple, Kevin.
Do you want to start, Dennis?
Sure. First of all, great things are happening in Hull education, there's no doubt about it. And I speak not only as a member of the Capital Planning Committee, but as a parent who's about to graduate his third student from Hull High School in just a few months, provided she stays on course for the next year. A couple of questions. How many students are in the system in total? And are any of those outside the Hull School Department? In other words, you guys mentioned the collaborative that we're doing. So what's our total population by school?
So total population by school,
There are 477 students at the Jacobs School, 242 students at the Memorial School, 350 students at Hull High School, and 18 students out of district. That's the October 1 enrollment. And we use that consistently, but we always report with October 1s.
I appreciate Mr. Devine, Mike, if you don't mind.
that's fine.
The point about integrating the 8th grade with the rest of the high school. If we were to look at a break point in terms of number of students, at what point would we think that it becomes logical and rational to consolidate the schools?
Take that one. We were talking about that just today, and I don't know that there's a precise number. And I looked back at things, and when the Damon School was closed, we had a very similar set of circumstances. That was shortly after Proposition 2.5 passed. There were limited resources. The country was coming out of a recession, and across the Commonwealth, there was a declining birth rate and declining school enrollment. That communities all over Massachusetts shuttered schools, and then we've seen over the past 30 years, they've been building schools because those schools were turned over for other uses. So the situation we have today is we're coming off the worst recession that this country has ever seen. People call it the Great Recession, the Long Recession. Linked to any economic downturn, there's a downturn in the birth rate. So we're seeing that now. The schools were built for 50 years, so I don't think there's a precise number. I think we have to look out 50 years, we have to look out 30 years, we have to look out 20 years. And there are people in this community who think the town may have made a mistake when the Damon School was closed, because shortly thereafter, the town was faced with overcrowding. So I wouldn't want to put a precise number on it, Mr. Blackhall, but it's certainly something that maybe down the road the town should consider again.
If I could just add to that, Dennis, the other thing that I would say is that number is such a moving target because who knows what's next coming down from the state and federal government. And I can't predict that. If you had told me that I would need to have enough computers for the entire sophomore class to take a test at the exact same time, if you had told me that 5 years ago, I would have said there's no way. So I can't answer that, unfortunately. And the other thing that I would say is I would plan on being here on June 7th she's going to make it.
Well, thanks for the insight.
Dennis, before you go on, Phil just had a comment.
Can I just amplify that question a little bit, Dennis? Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
One of the things that struck me is, the administrators have said that we think this is a preferred configuration, and, I have a whole series of notes here that I'll go through a bit later on, but, so there's an assumption on the configuration, K through 7 and 8 through 12. But more importantly, in the presentation, which was, I think, a very good presentation in the sense that it defined what the goals are for the department and what activities need to be accomplished, basically grade by grade or group by group. What we do know is that the buildings, when they were commissioned for a certain pupil size, as reported to the SBAB, that's how we got the money and so forth. So, for instance, when you look at Jacobs Elementary School, it was commissioned for 785 pupils. The Memorial Middle School was commissioned for 355 pupils. And the grade through 9, the high school was commissioned for 450 pupils. And, one of the questions I wrote down here was, I think one of the first questions we would want to do if we're going to go forward with this, and even if we don't go forward with this, I think something has to be done, which is go back to AI3 or go back to the architects and say, look, based on today's current standards, are these numbers still valid? Because throughout your presentation, you said, look, there are all these new requirements that are coming on board. And some of those requirements clearly weren't here 10 years ago or 15 years ago per your presentation. So it seemed to me that one thing that, one takeaway amongst a whole bunch, even again, if we don't go forward with this, would be to update those numbers based on current requirements. Are these schools still compliant with current educational requirements? That, to me, is a very easy question to get resolved, because AI3 is for instance, one of the 5 or 6 architectural firms that were designated by the state of Massachusetts as being master architects for the purpose of the school building. And we have a very good relationship with them. I'm sure they would do that in very short money for us to update these things. So I think that that's kind of a baseline piece of data that would be valuable for the school committee, as well as everyone else, to know what is the current capacity of these schools versus what was the capacity the day they were all opened.
It's a good point, Phil. What I want to mention, though, is your point speaks to the student capacity.
Yeah.
The number of seats that we have, the number of children that can fit in the chairs.
Yeah.
When the buildings were commissioned, they were also commissioned for certain ages of children.
Yes.
So the fact that the schools are under that capacity does not mean, it's not a logical conclusion to say that children of other ages belong there.
No, I recognize that, and I think that's kind of a second set of questions, because I understand and I appreciate the fact that the administrators cannot currently imagine how this would work, because that's not, quite frankly, their expertise. Their expertise is not the design of schools, and it is not the design of how to make the building work. They're given a building to work within, and they do a great job. The reason why there are folks that design buildings and design outcomes based on program inputs from the administrators is because they can look at a space and perhaps see a different outcome, or could say, I think that if you do this, that, or the other thing, this is how you could make that work. So I think the benefit of the presentation, is huge in the sense that, first of all, it very clearly articulates what types of things have to happen within certain age groups. I'm not, to be honest with you, I'm not completely convinced that the expertise is here to define whether or not all of that has to happen in this configuration, because I'm not an architect, you're not an architect. The design of these buildings wasn't done by educators. It was done by architects based on educator input.
And if
There's
And that's
a-
an important
yeah,
distinction, I think.
Well, there is a distinction, and I just want to
I'm not-
not
and
split
that's a-
hairs with you,
No.
but I want to assure you that there's quite a bit of expertise
There is.
among these administrators on how to best use spaces for children.
I agree,
Okay.
and I don't want it to be misconstrued, and I'll say it loud and clear. I'm not casting any aspersion on anybody, and I recognize there's a great deal of experience. But what I do know from projects and so forth, I can look at a building and look at a space. Because I'm not a trained architect, I can't see the same outcome as a trained architect or somebody who would design space, as an example. And the first question I think really does need to be addressed is, what is the current capacity of the buildings for their intended purpose? Is the middle school big enough for what you want to accomplish? Because what I heard today in the presentation are a whole new series of requirements that I don't think were present when the buildings were built. At least not to the, and they weren't as important as they currently are. So I think that's something that does need to be answered, regardless of whether you do a consolidation or not. That's a baseline piece of data that the school committee should have. What do you have available to you? Because it's a resource.
And I do, Mr. Lemnios, understand where you're coming from on that. You're right, I'm not an architect. So when I look at this building, there are definitely parts of this building that are beyond me. I would also argue that an architect is not an educator. And there are parts of looking at this building that an architect would look at and not know what they're talking about. I can add, you talk about 450 students. I can fit more students in classrooms. I can have class sizes of 25 to 30 students. At what cost? We are able to, with declining enrollment, lower some of our class sizes, especially for those students who struggle the most. And again, a college prep English 10 class, for example, could I fit 30 students in that classroom and say to the teacher, get them ready for MCAS? Oh, and by the way, the reading level in that classroom ranges from at grade level, above grade level, to several years below grade level. Yeah, I could do that. There's going to be significant cost to our students because of that. And so that number 450, again, yes, could we fit 450 students in this building? Yes. I agree with you that looking at how they configure the numbers now, if a new building's being built, I can't answer that, how they look at that. But I do know.
Do you feel you're currently at maximum capacity in this building?
Am I at maximum capacity?
Yeah.
No.
What's the tipping point?
If I had students evenly dispersed between grades, absolutely.
9 through 12 right now, how many more students can you accommodate in this building in your professional judgment before we have to go and build space or get additional space from the community?
That's not an off the top of your head question.
Should be answered.
But it needs to be, I mean, that's part of planning for going forward. If under your current educational model, and I understand the desire to do that, and I'm not arguing against that. What I'm saying is the administrators have looked at the current configuration of the system. They've come to a very strong conclusion as to how they believe it should be configured, which is absolutely why we ask the questions, is to get the response and to try to understand your perspective. But along with that comes the question, because we've heard, well, you could have a demographic swing. So if another 100 kids return to the Hull Public Schools, 50 more at Jacobs, 50 more at the high school, or whatever the case may be, at what point does this high school require additional space to be added if you were going to maintain your current educational model? And you may not be able to answer that tonight, but I think it has to be answered, because the underlying assumption of the presentation in part is we can't make really any change to our current configuration because we're at a very finely balanced point where we're able to accommodate all that is being required of us, and we have a little bit of squish room for something that may come down the pike in the near term. And that, is a very different dynamic than what the buildings were built to. I'm not arguing for the buildings, the model for the buildings in the past. I'm just saying.
Without any difficulty, without even a piece of paper and a pencil, we could easily accommodate another 120 students in these schools, 10 per grade. Easily. We could certainly look at that and look at it more carefully. But right off the top of my head, you asked if we could accommodate 100 more students easily.
But in this building, for instance, how many, what do you think, what's the?
But it's the same grades, correct? 9, 10, 11,
Yeah,
12.
see, that's.
Not adding any.
So.
And I will say something, last week you sat up, you were up there, and you said, if the schools say it's not a good idea,
Yeah.
they're telling you it's not a good idea, and now you're saying, well,
No.
I don't.
Excuse me, what I'm trying to do is get an understanding of it and understand where the tipping points are. And by the way, I still stand by that statement. One of my questions is what is the school committee's position on this? Are they going to make a vote tonight based on this presentation? Your administrators are telling you it's not a good idea. So what is the school committee's perspective?
Just to address.
I'll call on it.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, you can finish.
Oh, just to answer your question the best I could, okay? If you said to me we're adding 20 students to each grade at the high school, yep, handle it. 30 students to each grade at the high school, could we handle it? It'd be tough, and again, it would depend on the amount of students with disabilities, the amount of students that are English language learners. But 30, could we make it work? Somehow we could make it work. But the key to that is dispersed between the grades.
Right.
Now, I'm not talking exactly, you know,
No,
if
I
it was
get it.
35, 25.
Right.
But if the 8th grade would come up here as a group, and educationally, we feel that, look, it's best to keep these kids together as much as possible rather than having them with seniors and juniors, that's what would be incredibly difficult. 30 students, you know, so we can do the math, additional 30 students in each grade, I believe this building capacity-wise could handle.
Okay, thank you.
Anything more
Go to
than that
John
would be
Schmidt, and
very
then
difficult.
I'll go Steve Dennis.
I want to thank you for the very thoughtful presentation, but I want to step back for a moment and think about the reason why we're here, at sort of a bigger picture. As a community, we know that we have about $60 million in capital improvements before us, and we don't have a way to pay for them. So before we can go to the community and say, hey, we need some more money, we have to do our own due diligence to assure ourselves that everything that we have is being used in appropriately manner, not only for today, but for tomorrow. One of your closing comments is, with consolidation, the quality of the student's education will be significantly diminished. And from everything that you presented to me, I can't argue with you. But I also have to say that without, the reason we're having this conversation is because we believe, this committee believes, that it'd be in the community's best interest to have an independent study to confirm what you're telling us. And I think the quality of education would be lost if we don't have that study, if we don't perform that study. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck in the current fiscal cycle that we are at 3% a year. So the only way to improve the schools is to generate, the only way to improve this community and improve the not only what the schools needs, but our capital improvement needs, is with a debt exclusion or override. And for anyone to tell me otherwise, show me how we can do that. But in order for us to convince and educate our community, because you didn't all call yesterday to all the students' parents, and if you raise your hands, parents that are here that are not on the school committee or part of the educational system, you may only have 20 or 30 parents out of an entire school district. So we need to educate the community, not only the parents, but also all the residents. I've been through 2 overrides, and I've supported both of them, and both times we got kicked right in the stomach. So if we're going to do this, and I don't see any other way to get around this, we have to turn over every rock, and we have to explore every option, so we can go to the community with confidence saying, these are our options. So I appreciate your presentation. I'm not in a position to argue with anything that you're saying. I wasn't aware that there were so many new regulations since we had this conversation 4 years ago, and I agree it's probably more coming. But I do seek the committee's support in allowing this committee, or not allowing, but support in this committee going forward with a request for proposals to do a study. And we don't have to, we get to receive the proposals, we don't have to select them. If the numbers come in at $100,000, then I think we say, okay, that's ridiculous. But if the numbers come in at a more reasonable number, you know, I don't know what that number is, then maybe it's worth the effort, not only just to substantiate the information that we're being presented tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So I'm going to go back to Dennis.
Thank you, Kevin. We have $60 million of capital projects that we're going to need to do. None of them are a matter of choice. They're a matter of when they have to be done. If one looks at Nantasket Avenue, as you drove down here tonight, you're beginning to see some of the issues that we're going to have to grapple with sooner or later. Nantasket Ave may not fail like a seawall may fail, or like the town hall may fail. And believe me, I've been in the town hall from the basement to the bell tower up there. And I can tell you, I'll never do it again because I was scared to death. Seriously. I mean, that place beyond the second floor and below the first floor is in unbelievably bad shape. And I'm surprised that we haven't had someone come in and say, sorry, it's condemned. Maybe we're lucky. But the point is that whether we choose to go out and do an independent, objective, and complete study to be able to bring to the voters in town who are going to decide whether we can afford or they're willing to pay for additional things that they're not paying for today that we need to do, then we're going to be in a situation where we're going to have to pay for it out of the existing budget. And if we have to pay for it out of the existing budget, then that's going to hit not only the fire department, the police department, the DPW, it's going to hit the school department as well. And the point basically is that that is inevitable. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And quite frankly, at this stage of the game, I think that the town hall has long since passed its when. So with that said, in all due respect to all of what was said tonight, I would highly recommend that we go out and do the study, so at the very least, we have the information to be able to bring to the voters and say that we did our due diligence in terms of what can and can't be done. And if it turns out that the end result, and it may well be, and I wouldn't be surprised if it does turn out, that it is exactly as you say tonight, then we'll have something that says that we did our jobs as a school committee and as members of the capital planning committee to figure out the best way to go about what is that we need to go about doing before we ask for overrides or debt exclusions. Thank you.
Thank you. In that same vein, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the presentation. I learned a lot, and it was very helpful. I served on the school committee, as some of you know, during 6 very eventful years, including a period as the chair. And it was a key time for all of us, because we knew that the decisions we were making there with regard to the school buildings and that whole program would be with us not for one generation, not for two, but for, we were talking in terms of 50 to 60 years. As I sit here now, I realize that some of our assumptions were invalid. We had the sense, and believed in it passionately as school committee members, that when this project was completed, and it's been a beautiful job, when it was completed, there would be this sort of reverse flow, and that parents who were presently, yeah, they might have their kids educated at the Jacobs, but then when it came time to make the tougher decisions, would move their kids out. And that was happening then, and we thought that that was a reversible trend, that it would, and we'd have this renaissance, not just an academic renaissance, which you all are so intimately involved in, and we're very grateful for that, but also in terms of issues such as pride, and the Renaissance, Hull's Renaissance would really accelerate. I don't know why it didn't happen. You probably have your ears to the ground much better than I do in this day and age, and could perhaps answer that. And at our last meeting, there were some hints that some of you had some very strong feelings about why people are not sending their kids to Hull schools and the numbers that we had anticipated. Well, what we're really now, I think it's very important for all of us to keep this in mind. We are at a decision point as we were years ago, and in many ways that's not prejudice. That's I'm not indicating my view in which direction we should go here, but I offer it as food for thought. I'll give you for instance, and I think it's an important one. Every school day, 5 classrooms and up to 7, depending on how you do your counting, at the Jacobs School are not being used to educate the children of Hull. Is that an accurate statement?
5 classrooms are being used by the collaborative, Mr. Avakian, and some of the students in those classes are residents of Hull.
Some are.
Yes.
Okay. My point is that these empty classrooms, or what people believe are empty classrooms, has taken on enormous symbolic meaning. It's not to be ignored. A lot of our citizens, including taxpayers who do not have children in schools, senior citizens, etc., this has become a focal point. And I think that as we make the decision here about whether to proceed to the next step, you keep that in mind. I think it's very, very important. This committee, it's very, very interesting for me as I sit here and see the dynamic at work here, that this committee has met diligently for over a year, I believe it's been now, essentially a year and a half. Essentially, as Dennis indicated, witnessing and confronting what could be a dangerous, and I believe is a dangerous situation. This is not, it'd be really nice to have a good seawall. I mean, it isn't elective anymore. And everybody, including the taxpayers, are being asked to make tremendous sacrifices to save this town. Thanks for the opportunity, Kevin, I appreciate it.
Mr. Richardson, could I address the comment you made? I just want to say that our district-wide enrollment is declining. There's no question about that. In fact, it's declining across the Commonwealth. The percentage of students who live in Hull that attend Hull schools is increasing. And from a low of, in 2005 and 6, of 81% of Hull students attending Hull Public Schools, and we're now at 87%. So again, the number of students in Hull has declined. There's no question. The percentage of those students attending Hull Public Schools has increased.
Well, I appreciate that, but you know what the mistake is? That we're not getting that word of that out to this community. I can't remember the last time I've seen a newsletter from the Hull schools. Yet more than half of every tax dollar that everyone in this room spends, every parent in this room spends, is going to the schools. I mean, there's a breakdown here.
Do you know how many people in Hull are between the age of 5 and 18?
I don't have that.
I can't
I
answer
think
that.
it's 1,100. I'm pretty sure it's 1,100. Yeah, it's 1,100, and the school population's 1,060, right? 1,061 is the last reported number, so.
How many people in the town of Hull?
I think the last census was something in the order of about 10,005 or so. And that's been consistent for the last two 10-year census periods. It really hasn't changed.
So 10% of the population gets 60% of the funding.
That's not unusual. You know, let me just say something straight out on that argument. The question here, you know, we took a lot of effort to craft the question in the first presentation, and this is the second presentation on this topic, is not, first of all, it's not an us, them, and it's not an argument to reduce resources to the schools. That's not the question. The question that's confronting us on a go-forward basis is this reality that our revenue stream is going to generate for the next several years, if not more, about a 3% outcome. And to further amplify that point, today the House budget came out with a 2.5% increase on just one portion of state aid. It kept education aid flat from the governor's budget, okay? So the dilemma here is, are you going to say to the school department, realistically, you have to live in that 3% world when the reality is they have a 5% model or greater? And their 5% model or greater is predicated on kind of two things. One is they have these new mandates that have been referenced here. They have new technology requirements and so forth. And, you know, 85% of the budget is labor related. That's not unusual for any school department, by the way. So that's the dilemma that the town is facing. And as it was explained at the meeting last week, this is an examination of a strategy. If it's not the right strategy, then you have to still have that same problem. And you have to find a solution to that problem on a go-forward basis. And, you know, that's why we have, you know, we're examining this, because we've got a huge pent-up capital need that has to be addressed. And it's not just town hall, by the way. It's seawalls, it's roads, it's things that protect the infrastructure leading out to this part of town, for instance. So that has to be addressed. The capital needs have to be addressed. And at the same time, the four major departments that consume the bulk of the budget, and again, not unique to Hull, it's true just about everywhere you go, schools, police, fire, and public works. Those are the four dominant functions in every local government. They're the four departments that have a real problem living within that 3% reality. The smaller departments, they can live there. But the bigger departments, because of the nature of their service, have a real difficulty living there. So we're still confronting, you still have to confront that fundamental structural issue in some way, shape, or form.
I don't know, Mr. Kenny, and then you next, Mr. Kenny.
Yeah, I've been on the advisory board, and I've worked with the school department over the years, and I've backed the school. I work with them on the overrides. and I put a lot of time in it. And I support the schools 100%. I have no children in the school system, never have. But I believe in good education. And in my work in the various things and working on different committees, I've developed a real feeling for the town. And for the town right now, in this condition, the operating budget, as Phil has alluded to, really can only be 3%. The school department can't live with 3%. Where do we get the rest? We have to look at it from the point of view of overall for the town. How do we take care of the operating budget? How do we take care of the capital budget? We have to look wherever there's a possibility. And I really appreciate this presentation because when they did the 5-year plan, I worked with them on that. So I'm familiar with what the school does, what the school needs. But I'm also a Hull resident, and as a Hull resident, I think that it would be worthwhile to make this outside study or review. You've got a great basis that anyone that comes in here to look at it, you've got a great foundation right there, what you've just presented today.
Thank you.
So, I mean, if someone came in, that's where they would start. And the school department would have to be, as in business, if any time you have any study done, you got to get the commitment from the people that are going to be affected. So if the school department won't come in and say, yes, we'll work with someone from the outside, then forget it. Because it has to be the commitment from you, not the commitment from me, or not from the capital planning. It's got to be the commitment from the schools. And so that my real feeling, and it's a very strong feeling, that from the point of view that it should be looked at, and once it has been looked at, then it may very well, and I wouldn't be surprised, say that it's not feasible. Because I agree with a lot of the things that were shown here. But let's get someone come in and say, yep, it's not feasible, either from a space point of view or an education point of view. And once that's decided, then look at it and say, well, it's feasible. Then look at it from the financial point of view and say, what will change with that? What's the cost of doing something in Memorial, moving the thing, and put it all together? And when we do that, we may find out that it's not even financially proper to do. It's got to be in 2 steps. But the first step has got to be to do the study. Then it would, for all the people in the town of Howell, the problem or the elephant that's sitting out there saying, should they do it or shouldn't they do it? And with the ballot question, it's going to come up again. So my recommendation is that we move forward, have the study done, and then go from there. Thank you.
Mr. Richardson, could I ask a question? Mr. Seaver. So my question, and I think it goes back to what Mr. Clinton said about looking under every rock and every shell. Excuse me? Excuse me. As far as looking under every rock and every shell for a solution to this issue, I guess my question is, with what was just said, if this study goes forward and they find that it's not feasible, I assume that the town would need to come up with a contingency plan for what the next steps would be. And so my question especially for the school parents that I try to represent, is right now I feel like the choices they've been given is basically the metaphor was we're drowning. And so we close the middle school and we follow through with this plan, or we start to drown economically. And so my question is, why are there no other options on the table if we looked under every rock? And if there's going to be a plan, if it comes back, if the report comes back and we cannot do this, there's going to be another plan. So why isn't that put out there to the townspeople? Why is there really only one option, and it's economic failure or it's closing of the school?
May I take that one?
Yeah, please.
There isn't just one option that's being presented. What we're looking for is we're looking for the ability to convince the decision makers in this town that we've done the due diligence necessary to figure out what our priorities are, what it's going to cost, and how it's going to get paid for. And without the ability to say that we did our due diligence in terms of the most expensive thing that we're dealing with in town, then the taxpayers aren't going to be in the least interested in helping with the issues that we've got to deal with, because they're in a position where they're looking at it as being, you're adding us in the most difficult times that we've had in our lifetimes to give you more money and go off and do stuff with that money, and we're not convinced that you went down the path of proving that we really have no other choice and what the timing is of that.
And I understand that. I guess I'm just missing where there would have to be another choice, so why isn't that choice on the table?
What is it?
I can address the question.
I'm just wondering,
Yeah,
and that's what
yeah,
I'm asking. I'm
yeah.
not in the place to
No,
to
I
know
understand.
that.
No, I understand that, and part of it is you've got to take a look at, obviously where we've come in the last 4 or 5 years from a budget perspective, and the whole issue of the budget in the last 4 or 5 years has been a period of going from our low, which was basically fiscal year 10 when we closed the library and did all sorts of terrible things, and rebuilding it to kind of where we're at today. But the fact of the matter is, and we spoke to this a little bit last week, when you look at our local economy, we're 97% residential. We have a very, very small commercial base. We're in the process of trying to look to redevelop what can be redeveloped commercially, which is basically the Front Beach section. That was the whole push to establish the zoning overlay district last year through town meeting. We've got grants and so forth that are helping to change the infrastructure there, but redevelopment of an area is going to take a long time. It's not something that happens overnight, because you've got design, permitting, and most importantly, you have to get somebody who wants to spend the money to redevelop. The private sector has to be willing to step in and redevelop. So you've got limited ability to generate funds, because you've got 3 sources of funds in any city or town. You've got your real estate property taxes, which is what you can try to affect locally through land use decisions and zoning decisions. You've got state aid, which is basically formulaic, and it's predicated on 2 major formulas. The first portion of state aid is Chapter 70, which is education funding, and that is tied directly to enrollment. There's no question about that. That's the formula. And then the second portion is called unrestricted state aid, which is probably 70% of it is tied to actually lottery sales and what goes on with the state lottery and whether or not they're going to give the cities and towns 40% of the revenue back or not. And those are the 2 major drivers of state aid. And the third piece of the puzzle that drives the revenue side are local receipts. And the local receipts are things like building permits, activity that is generated on a local level, excise tax, motor vehicle excise, which is the single largest category of that. You've got some difficulty there. There is a mechanism under the law where you can go outside of your taxing authority. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts passed back in 1982 something called Proposition 2.5. It was voted by the people of the Commonwealth that limits the amount of money you can raise your taxes in any given year, your total levy. There is a mechanism to go outside of that for just general operational needs, and that's what's commonly referred to as an override. There's a second mechanism available for capital needs, which is called a debt exclusion. So for instance, this school that we're in tonight was built as a result of doing a debt exclusion. So the cost for the bonds in this school does not affect the operational budget, because it's outside of that whole calculation. So the question that will have to be posed to the citizens of Hull within relatively short order, unless you want to live in kind of that 3% world, you've got 2 questions that are going to have to be posed. Do you want to vote additional money for kind of day-to-day operational needs? And you can do that on the department level, you can do it on a general level. There's many schools of thoughts on it. Some people will say if just vote it departmentally and do a menu choice, that becomes very divisive in a community because some people will say, well, I'll never give a penny to the police department, but I'll give $1 to the schools, or whatever the case may be. There's lots of forms of those questions, but those dollars are typically funded just for operational needs. So, there's a lot of communities that every 2, 3, 4 years will just vote one of those because they hit the limit that was and no one can tell you why 2.5 is the magic number, by the way. If you talk to the people who put 2.5 in place in '82, there's no magic to 2.5%. It's just a number that was chosen. But that is going to be one issue that's going to confront the voters of town. The second issue that will confront the voters of town is the issue that confronted them when this high school was built. When you have a large capital project, no matter what it is, a generational project, which represents, quite a bit of that $60 million, do you want to pay extra taxes in order to finance that project beyond what the law limits you to? And you have to make the argument why that makes sense. And generationally, those are generational projects. You do them once every 30, 40 years. You don't build a high school every year. You build it hopefully once every 30 or 40 years. So those are the issues that are going to be put to the voters of Hull. Part of that question, in my estimation and others' estimation, the voters are going to ask, have you done everything you can possibly do? Have you turned over every rock? Have you looked at every possible way to prevent you coming to me and asking for more money? And you have to be able to answer that question.
One more thing to go along with that.
Quick follow-up.
Every year at town meeting, since Phil has returned to town in 2007, I think, Phil, Phil puts up a picture of the amount of local aid that we did not get going back to 2003. And there are 3 components to that. One component is regular local aid that has nothing to do with the school department. The second is a part that is generated based on the number of students in the schools. And the third is that there was a change in the actual formula itself that affected 11 communities out of 350 communities in the state of Massachusetts, of which Hull was one of the 11. I think it was $11 million that was the number that you put on the chart last year. A significant amount, well into the millions, was as a result of us not being able to get state aid tied to students that we expected to be here that didn't materialize. So if I remember correctly, we had 1,500 plus students going to school here in Hull back in 2003, somewhere around there, and now we've got slightly less than 1,100. So that's 400 students that we don't have here. Those 400 students represent a lost opportunity cost or revenue loss that we are not getting on an annual basis that would flow into the town's budget. And so therefore, when one looks at this and says, gee, we're 400 students below where we would have originally thought we would be at this stage of the game, that translates to probably well over $1 million a year, I would think, Phil, because I think it's somewhere around $3,500 a student, something like that. So wouldn't it be great if we could fill all of the seats in the school? So if you can come up with, this goes to your question, Mr. Sevo, wouldn't it be great if we could find another 200 or 300 kids to come to Hull schools who are residents of Hull? Because I would think that the operational costs of educating those students would not be all that significant because you have the infrastructure and the teaching capacity to do it. You've got essentially empty seats that could be filled. So.
Yeah, Kevin, I just have some random thoughts here. We keep talking about 3%, like the major departments can't live within that 3 to 5%. I'm just trying to figure out, I know that we don't have a crystal ball, I know you can't give any guarantees on this, but it's almost as if you're saying, at least this is what I'm hearing as a school committee member, and I'm sure some of the parents are hearing this, that if we do this school consolidation, that we can expect more than 3%, or is that, I mean, I guess I'm just trying to figure out, like, why do we keep throwing around 3 to 5%? It just seems like
3 to 5%, I think, is pretty straightforward. The 3% is what I believe you can reasonably expect in terms of revenue growth over the course of the next 4 or 5 years, and I can demonstrate that pretty straightforward. And I think that it's pretty safe to say that the school department, along with the other major departments, I'm not trying not to single out the school department, will have a great deal of difficulty living in that 3% world.
Right.
And so the question is, how are you going to bridge that difference? You know, that's the issue. And because there's not enough money in all the other departments to bridge that difference. When you, one of the charts that we put up, the budget presentation, when you take out the 5 major functions, you know, police, fire, public works, schools, and library, which is, you know, the kind of one of the larger budgets, there's like $1.5 million left for everything else. And most of those other functions, if not all of them, with the exception of probably one, which is Council on Aging, is a statutory requirement. I mean, you have to have an assessing function, you have to have a tax collecting function. You know, that's not something we made up in Hull, that's something that's required. And so, you know, that's the dilemma that's facing the community. And the way in which most communities, by the way, cross that dilemma is they ask for a 2.5 override. They say, look, here's the argument, here's what we need to do, here's what we have available, we need some additional assistance here. The problem, in part, is will the public vote that if they don't think you've done everything you can to avoid it?
So you're saying
That's the
that, you're saying that we have to start taking steps in order to convince the public or the taxpayer to basically trust us and then possibly do a Proposition 2.5 override
Well, I
or a
think
debt
with-
exclusion.
There's no question with some of the capital, you're gonna have to do a debt exclusion. The capital, the nature of the capital that's out there, it can't be supported within the existing budgetary stream. And forget about town hall, I mean, let's take that off the table, but just talking about the seawalls that protect large portions of the community's infrastructure that's in the roads, the gas mains, the sewer, the water. I mean, right out here on this spit, we're gonna spend, we got a grant, thankfully, from the state for $2.7 million that's gonna do maybe 500 feet of seawall that's adjacent to the sewer treatment plant. There's still a huge stretch that needs to be done. We have the engineering reports, it's not something we made up. So the point is, and that stretch, by the way, has the sewer lines, the water lines, the electricity, the gas mains that service this whole end of town. So that has to be addressed. You know, these are the things that the capital program identified. And by the way, the capital program had a component in it which talked about IT, for instance, which there is no question the IT footprint of the school is going to get bigger. We've recognized that. We're trying to put what money we can into that. But that footprint is going to grow, and it's going to grow dramatically, and it's going to require not only hardware and software license and so forth, but it's going to require more people. You can't continue to run an IT function in the school with basically 3 people who are being spread to not only do kind of, you know, they're doing everything. If you look at Judy Sade and her crew, it's amazing to me the amount of productivity we're getting out of them for the amount of technology that's in the buildings. And that's only at 60%. So this is the dilemma facing all of us. It will lead, we have to position ourselves to go to the voters to ask for additional taxing authority, whether it be for the capital projects or for the operational needs. Personal opinion, people aren't going to give us more money unless they think we've done everything we can collectively as a group of people to, you know, avoid that. And you have to be able to demonstrate that you've done everything you can to avoid it. Have you done your due diligence?
Okay, not to belabor this, but so if we were to do this consolidation, we may get 3% increases in our budget, or we may get 5%. It all depends on.
The point of the study.
But why do we keep throwing that? I just keep hearing that number all the time, like 3 to 5%.
Well, let me ask
we
the
can't
question.
live under that world.
Let me ask the question in the reverse. Can the school committee say for the next 5 years you can live with a 3% operational growth?
We're going to have to try. I mean, we got
but that's not
problems this year. I mean, alone.
Right. So I'm not arguing that's a bad thing. I've never said 5%'s a bad thing. What I'm saying is the reality of running a school department in today's day and age, whether we like it or not, whether I like it, whether anybody over here likes it, the reality is if you want to keep it progressing, there's all sorts of pressures on the good doctor and the staff to produce an outcome. Okay? The reality is, in order for them to get to that outcome, they're going to need more money than what I can reasonably assure them they can have in the next 5 years. My job in this puzzle is to try to, A, identify what we can afford, And B, try to tell people, hey, that's not gonna be enough if you wanna get the outcome. And I just, I think that you have to recognize that schools can't live in a 3% world. They're gonna have a lot of difficulties.
Okay, just a couple other comments, too?
Go ahead.
All right.
We have a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, I know. So the other thing is, Mr. Blackall mentioned the Chapter 70 money as far as the budgetary and the amount of money that we lost from like 2003 to 2008 or whatever it was. I just want people to know, and I think that Scott Sevo, during his presentation, he actually touched upon this. If we do this consolidation, I mean, there is potential here where we will have less students. There's potential where some parents who have the capability and the financial wherewithal, they're going to potentially move their kids to private schools or go to charter schools. So I think that that's something that has to be considered in this whole, I mean, it's a very complicated decision. I mean, it's not, I don't think it's clear cut, and I think that the presentation was really good. But I also hear what you guys are saying. I understand what Phil's saying as far as the budget concerns.
We're not talking, this whole scenario, what was presented last week and what was presented tonight, is not the decision to do it. The issue, the issue before the community is, do you want to engage in a study to look at this? And the outcome is the outcome, and then we evaluate what that outcome is. So, to get into the argument, I think we were very careful in the last couple of weeks, certainly in the presentation last week, to not advocate an outcome. It was to advocate a study. And because you have to look at, what are the possible solutions? This idea is not just stuck in this room. This idea is in the body politic, and those are the people that make the decision on funding. It's none of us. It's town meeting, and it's the voters at the voters block. And I'll agree completely with Dennis and with the other members of the committee, Dick Kenny and others, that if we're not able to say, look, we did our due diligence, we looked at that idea, it won't work from a variety of reasons, we have to do something else, I think that gives us credibility with the voters. If you feel that this is enough credibility, then the school committee should take a vote and say, we are satisfied that the administrators have given us enough information and there's enough credibility on the issue, because that's within your purview. You ultimately control this decision. It's not anybody on this committee, it's not the Board of Selectmen, it's not anybody. So you have a very tough decision to make as chair of the school committee and all the members. Your administrators have given you an answer to a question. Now you need to make a decision, because the rest of us can't move forward until you do.
I do have a number of people. I am just going to ask that when you do speak, if you could just state your name, just so we have it on the record, but you're next.
Kelly Huxtable. I'm a parent of a 2- and 4-year-old here. I work in an independent school that is 18 months to 8th grade. I do not think there is any negative impact on the younger kids. If anything, I think it smooths the edges off of the 7th and 8th graders. They're helping the younger kids. It's a community. It's amazing to watch them. Just help the kids even get to, exhibits or, whatever they're doing, And I think it's really, I just feel like it's very misleading. I think there was a lot of good information in the 2 presentations, but I also think that there's no data. It's very heartfelt and emotional, and I understand that you live that every day, but I think we need data. We need to know what do we save? What does it look like? It seems like combining the schools is a scheduling nightmare for you to tackle as the administration, is your job to do, but that seems to be the barrier right there to moving forward to saving our town. We're a community, and I think it's, as someone who grew up here, who graduated from here, who was here when they did the 7th and 8th grade transition and was in 7th grade, I think I came out just fine with that consolidation. But we were able to have more things because of that consolidation. That saved our programs and other things. I feel like when I hear you speak, the 3 of you, I hear this is a big pain in the butt. This is stopping us. We have no data. We have no data. And also I thought was interesting was a lot of schools are actually moving back to the K through 8. What was it? The American Association of School Administrators had a big discussion about this recently, how Chicago public schools advocate for the K through 8. They feel like 7th and 8th graders are more successful, that there's research and data on that. But I didn't hear that here. I heard a lot of emotion. I'm curious to find out. I hope that we go forward with a study and we get the numbers, you know, in terms of educational outcomes. You know, what's it like in terms of, you know, just maintenance costs? How does that differentiate, like the 2 schools instead of 3? IT departments, infrastructure costs. I do tech. I also teach classes. We don't have a computer lab. Kids seem to be doing just fine. They get a lot of one-on-one instruction. They're also not a one-to-one program, which is a huge expense. Huge. Is there validity in that? What assessments are being done on that? I don't know. I feel like I hear a lot of emotion through like the newspaper, through talking to people, that this is important. It's a 21st century thing, but I never see any data, any assessment where the success is happening. Like, I don't know about other people, and I know it's emotional. It's education. It's our kids. We want to see them get the best. But let's see some real numbers, some real movement forward instead of, you know, the emotion, which I think is important, but it also needs to be backed up with research and data.
Mr. Richards, may I just respond very quickly?
Real quick.
I would just say, nobody that works for the public schools worries about anything being a pain in the butt. That will never, if I could just finish, please. That will never, ever, ever drive any decision made by the administrators and the school committee in this town. Never. Thank you.
But I'm saying that presentation, I think about 15 times it was said, scheduling, scheduling. We won't be able to schedule. I mean, a schedule is something that can be, you can make it work, but we've already put up that barrier that scheduling is impossible. Just impossible, so we have to cut things out and people are gonna lose things before we even have any data. So,
I'm going to, you're next.
I was just going to say.
I'm sorry, can you just say your name just for the people who don't know?
Jennifer Fleming.
Thank you.
And I'll admit, I'm a parent in the public school system, so I do have a bias. But I was very moved by the presentation, not the emotionalism of it, but the facts and the intuitiveness of the administrators towards the needs of certain age groups and their educational needs and the mandates. And I think that's wonderful. What I consider with these meetings, unfortunately, is that they seem to be a waste of time because the planning board is going to go ahead with their study, which is going to be expensive, even though we've gone over again and again and again that we're operating in a 3% world and we're hamstrung by revenue loss. And I just have a question in terms of the planning board. Have you ever considered other solutions? Have you considered maybe the town using its legal authority maybe to assume possession of some of the delinquent properties in town? Maybe you can convert one of those to a town use, make that into offices. There's that laundromat on Nantasket Ave. It's an eyesore. I'm sure it's delinquent. Have you thought about any other solution than consolidating schools, which the department has said would be detrimental? It is a solution that is designed to appease a certain sector of our populace. So that's my question. What else do you consider?
That can be part of the study.
Sorry?
That can be part of the study.
I think it should be.
And I won't say anything. Thank you. I did have Joe Moschino, and then you're in the back here after Joe.
Oh, I'm next. Joe Moschino, 1 Bradford Avenue. And just as a point of order, I don't have children, and I so don't have children in the school, and there are some of us who value education in our community just because. So I wanted, as I was listening, a tremendous, very informative presentation. Thank you all. That was very interesting. And thank you to the committee. I think this was a very interesting dialogue to listen to, and I think you're asking great questions, so thank you for your work. I did want to make 2 comments, though, as I was sitting here listening. Sort of going back to reframe the discussion a little bit. I tend to take the long view of these things, and I tend to approach things from a policy perspective. And so as I was listening to Dr. Terrell's presentation on the space need, it was interesting to then hear Phil's reaction to that. My reaction relative to the space needs was the building, not the square footage, not the classroom and how it may or may not have been used, but the building itself. And I really thought that you did a great job talking about school culture. I think what we need to sort of take a step back and think about is the value proposition here. We have a constitutional and statutory duty to educate children, and I would argue a moral and an ethical one. And so that is the school committee's charge, and that is our obligation as a community. That's our primary obligation. And so I think that it's an interesting question to ask relative to space, but I think that the space question should be asked relative to the school and how you create positive school culture, because that is what all of the trends in education, policy theory, and all of the research is showing, is that creating that school culture. And so for my part, I thought this was a very persuasive, fact-based, evidence-based presentation, and I thought it was persuasive. And so I actually felt personally as an individual that it was sufficient to hear Dr. Terrell and her expertise and her staff support relative to this question. And I would just argue, but I do appreciate the committee is thinking strategically and may want to validate some of that for the non-academics in the room. But when you're thinking about how you approach that question of validating their presentation for yourselves, validating it for others who might not share my personal perspective, I would start from what is the primary goal here. And it is to educate children, and everything we should do should start from the premise that we are doing it in the best interest of our children and their education. There's tremendous research that actually relates to and demonstrates that successful completion through K through 12 actually has positive outcomes for your health, for your earning potential, for your contribution to society, not needing social services. And so I think that when we talk about the value of education and educating our children and what that means in the long term of things, to things that go back into our community, I think you really can't undervalue it enough. So I would just say that as the committee is thinking about how it's going to approach the town strategically relative to the tremendous amounts of needs that we have, and let's face the facts, people, these are collectively, we have deferred all of these costs, so this is our own making, these problems. And they're serious, and we need to approach them sensibly, but I would just argue that we shouldn't be putting it in opposition to the children. That is not what we should be doing. We should be thinking about it as a collective community problem solving, and we should start from that premise. So I just go back to your original presentation, and you're talking about the school climate and what it is you're trying, what your goal is relative to that. And that's really the assessment relative to the space. It's not the square footage. It's not was the classroom being used fully, because that's going to ebb and flow. It's really the culture that you're trying to create in that middle school and how important that is to our children's educational success. That's where you start. That's the value proposition. And then as you're thinking about how you use it relative to whatever you feel you need to do to put before the town to validate your choices. Thank you.
Thank you, John. It is 9 o'clock. I just want to quickly, I'm going to just say who I have on my list, and we can try to cut it off after that, but if anyone else wants to speak, just raise your hand and I'll add you on. So I have the woman in the back, then I have Anne Marie Dunn, I have Stephanie Peters, I have Ann Murray, I have John Brannon, Kathy Bose, the gentleman in the back, I added you on, Michelle Lanner, and then David Clinton. So
Can I help clean up?
oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'd go back to everyone. But if there's anyone else in the audience, just if you want to just put your hand up, I'll add you on the list. So I think I got everyone in order, and if I didn't, I apologize. So,
Leah Putnam, coming here not only as a parent of 4 children, range from age 10 to 4.5 months, so I have a vested interest in our school system. But I'm one of the younger end of the demographic for parents. I graduated in 2003. My 7th grade class was the first class to have to stay at the middle school, because it used to be K through 3, 4 through 6, and then 7 through 12 at the high school. The 8th grade class came back with us, and they had a horrible transition because they were already going out, partying, drinking, doing all these things that they weren't supposed to be doing. They had a different culture. They had a really hard time coming back. And the reason why that they separated the 7th and 8th grade from that school was because they were engaging in activities they were too young to be participating in. It was a problem. There have been comments made that there were higher teen pregnancies. There were higher dropout rates at the time. These are all things that I think we had that junior, senior high school, and we separated it for a reason, because it wasn't healthy for our kids to be with each other from those age groups, and that it happened for a reason. So that's why we ended up restructuring our schools to fit the different grade levels we have now. And I don't feel like that's necessarily really been brought up, the fact that we did revert back to a strictly high school for those reasons. It's just my bad, and I'm gonna go.
Thank you for your comments. It was, yeah. Anne Marie, you.
I know this is like the third time in the past 10 years that we're looking at doing this again. Hiring an outside committee, doing this research. I was on it with Mr. Kenny, John, we all went through this already, twice now. That it's not our kids' responsibility to be split up to save this town. It's not. Why aren't we looking at other resources? Why are we not looking at splitting up town hall? Why are we looking at splitting up our children to save this town? Split up town hall, find a place to put 6 offices, the assessor's office and other. There's 6 rooms available somewhere. Why are we not looking at figuring out how much is it going to cost to move town hall? How much is it going to cost to lose the middle school? How much is it going to cost us, our kids? How much is it going to cost? Why are we only looking at the cost of our children and not at the cost of town hall? To move our police station, our fire station, our town offices, instead of just moving 250 kids.
Well,
why is it our kids' responsibility to save this town? We should be looking at this is the 3rd time. And the other 2 times, the same committees were hired. Committees were brought in. The data was given. There was data like crazy given. And it came out that it was not best for this time. And so, but nothing else happened though. We did the data, we did the research. It came out it wasn't a good idea. That was the end of it. There was no, as Mr. Sevo said, that was the end of it. There was nothing else put out there. If our kids didn't save this, and our school system didn't save this, nothing else saved it. So we lost money to our schools, we lost money here, we lost money. Our kids paid for it, but nobody else paid for it. Our town hall's still there, they're still working, our police is still working, everybody's still working. So why not look, how much is it gonna cost us to move town hall to our middle school? Why are we not looking at how much is it gonna cost us instead of just our children, what it's gonna cost our children?
And to answer that, well, I want to do less than 2 minutes because I'm trying. It's the blood control answer. To answer that, if you would, I don't know if you were at the presentation on Thursday or not, but we actually talked about those issues and talked about that you would, one of the components of this study would be a financial study to look at those kind of issues that you're raising and to look at alternatives.
Because it wasn't the other 2 times we had committed.
Well, I can't speak to the other 2 times. What I understand is there was.
It's twice, it's 10 years.
Well, what I understand is there was a school study that was done in 2010, I think. And that was done by the school department that touched on many of these topics. And as a matter of fact, that presentation is on the town website, the school department website, if people want to go look at that. And people can look at that, and you can see it echoes some of the items that were raised this evening, and this evening's presentation amplifies some of those items. So I can't speak to a 3rd time. As far as I'm aware, this is the first time the Capital Committee has ever taken this issue up, because the Capital Committee has only been in place for about a year.
Just don't make it, once the research comes out, don't make the schools, the town is gonna look at it saying, well, there the school goes again.
First of all,
You
nothing
know,
can happen.
Because that's what always
What you-
happens,
what-
and it's always the
well,
school's fault.
First of all,
nobody else's.
one thing that should be very clear, nobody other than the school committee can repurpose a school under Mass General Law. So the ultimate authority in this whole matter is going to be the school committee. The voters' town meeting can't say, I want to change the school function to something else. The voters can't say it, which is why the question that is going before the ballot in May is really just a referendum question. So you have 5 folks that are, some of which are here this evening. They're receiving input from their administrators. They need to make a decision. Do they want to go forward with a study or not? If they're satisfied, then they're satisfied.
Give them another option, though. Like, if this is an option, show the townspeople that.
Well, that's what we're trying to do with
this.
this.
Maybe we can.
That's what we're trying to do with the study. That's exactly what we're trying to do with the study. But this is,
Thrown out.
well, you're probably correct that there wasn't other options. There were, I will say this, that when you start looking at the arc of what has happened over the last 5 years, there's been significant changes in a variety of functions. And, but the reality is there are some things that you don't have a lot of options for. And so the concept of consolidation at Memorial Middle School isn't just about town hall. It's about putting in place a solution set for the library, which was a very prominent issue back about 5 years ago when the library trustees were looking to get a new library space, as an example. The Council on Aging is in a building that is woefully deficient, and that's one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing population in town, is age 65 plus. So, you know, the concept of the Memorial School isn't a town hall concept exclusively. It's the concept of you've got all of these capital needs that are looming out there. You've got a library capital need, you've got a Council on Aging capital need, you've got a town government capital need, you've got a whole wide variety of functions that are looming out there. And you've got this other operational constraint that is looming. And the question is can you put together a strategy that makes sense fiscally and operationally? So it's not at the expense of the children. It's really saying, going forward, are you going to stay in the same footprint that you are currently? And if you are, what does that mean? And how are you going to accommodate that?
Stephanie Peters next.
I just wanted to say, Phil said it a few times, that the bottom line is that this decision rests with the school committee. I'm certainly just one member. We've brought this forward. Now, this is actually our third iteration. We've had two that have been brought directly to us. And both times, we, as committee members, have decided that we did not want to pursue it any further, the consolidation, because it appeared to us that education would be impacted. Our number one goal, well, our first goal is safety of the students. The second goal is educating the kids. I thought perhaps tonight, by having all these administrators here, kind of going through this, that there would be some movement on the capital planning committee, that we may not have to do an outside study. I was wrong. As one member of the board, you know, you had outlined there's 4 different sort of avenues that you wanted to have RFPs done on. I think we need to bring it back to the board. There's a member not here tonight, so I don't feel really comfortable voting on the whole thing. But the education, to me, and all of you have, I believe, said this, that if the educational piece comes back that it can't be done and it will impact education, then we won't do it. So I would propose that we bring back to the school committee to vote to do an educational thing, because it sounds like you need that document in order to move your priorities forward. We need that document so that we're not looked at as the us versus you mentality, and that you've sandbagged the room, you've stacked it, you've got everybody saying exactly what you want to say. I don't agree moving forward with, you know, architectural or financial stuff right now, because I think that that just pits people against each other, because then we're going to have it out there, oh, it's $12 million, and you guys, it's going to cost us this, and then it becomes that whole thing. If education is truly the number one priority of this committee, to close the middle school, and it's our number one priority, I believe that that's the only RFP that should move forward, and it should be brought back to the school committee to vote on. Again, I'm one member. I know that in the past we haven't brought this forward because we do feel it will impact education. But if this is the only thing that will move it forward and allow you the document that will hopefully support everything that we've presented, then I think that at this point, everybody's going to have their own opinions, and it's still going to be sort of an us versus them mentality. I know we have several speakers still to go. But as a school committee member, that's sort of where I stand on this whole thing.
Thank you. Anne Murray.
Anne Murray on Summit Avenue. I'm not a parent. I'm not a teacher. I'm a concerned citizen. I'm a proud graduate of Hull High School, public school education. What some people in the room may not know about me is I also had a father who was an elementary school principal in a public school for 28 years. So I am very concerned about education. When it came up to about voting for the schools, renovating the schools, you know, I sat there, gee, I'm not a parent, I don't have kids going to, but I realized there are a lot of people who helped put me through the schools. And as an adult, I felt it was my responsibility to turn around and pay it back. I get really frustrated coming to these meetings, and, you know, Dr. Terrell, I'm sorry, I don't expect people to go back to the dark ages in my education, but that's not just what I said last week. I advocated to have a study, I think the committee members pointed out, for due diligence, so we all can feel comfortable. we are all in the same boat, and I'm frustrated coming here and feeling like there's people yanking on the right oar, there's people yanking on the left oar, and we're going around in circles, and we're not really getting answers that are helpful to anyone. And I am hopeful that more than due diligence, more than having an answer of should we consolidate, shouldn't we, at least we'd feel comfortable with whatever answer we're getting, 100%. But maybe there's some useful information in there that can help move the boat forward for all of us. Maybe there's some useful information of how maybe the schools could consolidate things better. You know, sometimes, as people say, you're inside the box, it's hard to see outside the box. And maybe having that perspective from outside the box will be helpful to us. So, you know, again, I don't think you do one part of the study without doing the others, because I think it does have the components that the committee pointed out. It has a financial component, it has the educational component, it has the space needs component, it has the operational component. And I think, you know, if you're gonna do it, you go all in. And do I want to spend the money? No. But I think there are times where, you know, penny wise, pound foolish. And I really do feel, as a concerned citizen, for everybody, you know, I'm not against the kids. And I'm tired of coming to the meetings and being made to feel like I'm against the kids if I don't vote for them. And I know my frustration you're hearing in my voice is that of a lot of people in this community who don't have children in the schools and are concerned and do want good schools and do want the best for our kids. So I would ask all of you to think long and hard and to really consider that this might be in the best interest of the community as a whole. Thank you, and now I'll get off the soapbox.
Thank you, Mr. Brandon.
Yeah, John Brandon, 11 Merrill Road. I also do not have any children, nor do I have any kids in the school system. And I was a benefactor of a good education. And when I ask questions of the school system, it is very frustrating because you feel as though you are against kids and you are against education. And nothing could be further from the truth. Whether people choose to believe that or not, that's up to them. I've learned a lot of things in business in the last 40 years that I've been in it, and one of them is everybody has a boss. Everybody has a boss. And in this particular instance, our boss are the citizens of this town. And when your boss asks you to do something, generally speaking, you do it, or you lose your job. In the private sector, anyway. I don't understand, the study may come back and say, we need to really seriously examine this. The study may come back and say, you know, we really need to spend more money in our school system. What are we afraid of? Seriously, what are we afraid of? I don't get it. You know, a couple other quick points. We spoke about the fact that 87% of the students, 87% of the students in Hull are actually going to Hull High School. I think that's great. Up from 80 to 87, that's wonderful. The problem is the population in schools is still declining. So you can make it 95% of people go to Hull High School, and the population in schools is still going to decline. It's a demographic study, and we can talk about the demographics of the study. We can talk about the demographics of a depression or a recession, what have you. We need to look at the demographics of our town. Because the town is aging, the town has fewer families with fewer children. And I'm a huge proponent of you have to have a good educational base to attract people to town. You also have to have an attractive town to attract people to come to town. And we are, at this point in time, a large portion of our income from a town, the revenue from our town, is going towards one of the avenues and is not going towards the other avenue. And I think we all need to take a good, hard, serious look at that. And my last question is, and this is just a question because you did a great job. There's a lot of stuff in here I didn't know. And I appreciate your enthusiasm. I appreciate your desire. That's what good people do. With all of these things that are now required, could you tell me, like in the last 5 years, what our teacher base has done to, I assume with all of these new responsibilities, we've had to increase the number of administrators, we've had to increase the number of teachers. Could you kind of say, in the last 5 years, how many teachers have we added? How many administrators have we added to adapt to all these new regulations?
The number of administrators has not increased, And regarding the teaching force, I don't have that data with me tonight.
Okay, I mean, has it gone up 5%, 10%, stayed?
I don't have those specifics, and I don't want to give you an incorrect number. I can get back to you.
If there are all these additional responsibilities, I would assume you're not putting it on the same teachers to do all that much more work. Or if you are, if there aren't any more teachers, then
We cut over
that would-
40
that-
positions.
excuse me one second.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
if there, we're saying we need more space. If you're putting more kids in more space, there needs to be, I would think, more administrators, more teachers, more something to justify moving those kids to all this additional space. I may be way off base on that, but it seems like a fairly simple equation to me.
Ms. Brandt, I can't give you an exact number off the top of my head. I will tell you this. There are less teachers, there's less support staff working at Hull High School than there was when I arrived in 2009. And I could get you the number, but I wouldn't want to do that off the top of my head, but I can tell you there are less adult bodies in this building working with kids than there was when I arrived here in 2009.
I guess following that full circle, that's been a result, I would assume that's been a direct result of budgetary constraints. We come right back to the same thing with what Mr. Lemnios has been talking about as far as budget concerns. Unless this town elects to vote for an override or a debt exclusion, we're going to stay in this very vicious circle for a very long time. As our boss, as the taxpayers, I believe they deserve the opportunity to see the town administrators say, done a study, and believe it or not, the results are contrary to what popular opinion has been. But let's do it, and do it from an outside perspective. Because it cannot, in my mind, it cannot be tainted by people who have vested interests in maintaining one side of the coin or the other. I want to see, I pay my taxes. I'll pay more taxes for the kids. I have no issues doing that, but I want it justified. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kathy Rose is next. I have 4 more people that have their hand up to speak.
Okay, to start off with what Mr. Blackwell and Mr. Barkin had said earlier about the Capital Planning Committee doing their due diligence. And I've mentioned this to you several times ago. As a citizen, and Mr. Branner said it perfectly, as one of the bosses of this community, there's no place for me to go on the town website to locate the PowerPoint presentation that was presented at town meeting, itemizing the projects that the Capital Planning Committee had identified that needed serious attention.
There will be tomorrow.
And in addition to that, I would also like all the agendas posted for your past meetings and the minutes from those meetings.
We'll have to get us as the secretary.
Oh.
As long as he gets us the minutes, we'll bug it.
We want the citizens of this community to be educated and know the facts, and that has to be done. I have another question for Dr. Terrell. What is the status of your formal inquiry to the school building assistance program? Is there a timeline in which you can expect a response to that?
I was told anywhere from 2 weeks to a month and a half.
In 1998, this school district was in search of a new superintendent. And at the time, the then school committee charged the MASC, the Mass Association of School Committees, to help conduct that search. And in 98, they sent a gentleman, Jim Harney, to this community. And he was charged by the school committee to meet with various groups across the town of Hull. One of them was parents. And he met with us at the middle school library one evening, and there were parents from all grade levels, elementary, middle, high school. And he asked for some feedback, and then he gave us a list of questions, which he explained he was asking of every group. He was meeting from people from town government, from the Chamber of Commerce, the senior center, and one of the questions he asked was, of the 3 schools, which do you consider the flagship school of the Hull Public Schools? And I sat there and I listened to parents, high school parents, middle school parents. At the time, I was an elementary school parent. And they all said, without any debate, that the Jacobs Elementary School was the flagship school of this district. And I found that troubling, because if you look at any successful school district, the high school should be that flagship school. And I am quite confident in saying right now that I fully believe that Hull High School is the flagship school of the Hull Public Schools. And that took a number of years of work, and I have to applaud the teachers from the Jacob School, middle school, high school, with that happening. Administrators in creating wonderful cultures in each one of the schools, support staff, and even with the budget cuts that we've seen in the past few years, and I participated in developing 6 of those budgets, being on the school committee. So even with the budget restraints that this district has seen, we've still made strides forward, and you can see that in the students, you can see that in the data that's presented, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. The gentleman in the back.
Over me?
Yes.
Hi. My name is Carlos Alduondo. I'm coming from a very biased position. I have 2 children in the school system here, in the Jacob School, and I'm also an educator. I've been an educator for the 12 years. The last 2 I've been a coach, math content specialist for the city of Boston. I currently work with 6 schools in the district. Now I know Boston is a very different district, but 6 schools gives me a good sample to get some impressions. And I see the results of complying with all these new mandates and the overcrowding of schools and teachers, you know, going down the hall with their cards and sharing classrooms. And, you know, I have access to that data, and the data speaks for itself. The student achievement is affected, no doubt. I know we've moved beyond, the discussion has moved on beyond that to, you know, we're talking about the studies and all that, but just wanted to show my support. That was a fantastic presentation, and it spoke to my heart. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to try to keep it short, because Stephanie did say a lot. I'm not against the study. I am an educator, and I do believe what they presented is exactly what the independent evaluator is going to say. I have seen many, many schools, and I do think middle, junior, senior high schools can work if they're made correctly. We have a couple of K-8 schools in the district that I work in, and I can honestly tell you that the 7th and 8th graders, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, I've totally separated from, just because there were so many complaints of, you know, the music, the naughty music that they listen to, and for the kindergartners. Developmentally, they shouldn't be together. They have separate entrances. That's how it works out in a big school system. I don't know how big your school is, but I'm not against it if it was developmentally, and I don't think that this high school is made for 8th graders. I don't. That's just my opinion, but I'm an educator, and I've seen, I'm not against the study, because I do believe what they presented is exactly spot on.
Great, thank you. Last speaker that I had on my list is David Clinton.
Hi, Dave Clinton, 55 Gosnell Street. I'm a member of the advisory board. There's been a number of things said that I don't 100% agree with, and I don't 100% disagree with. In terms of something that was said by one of the parents on the other side of the room, they talked about, you know, is the town doing everything that they can to figure out what to do with the town hall and these other buildings? And as someone who's been sitting on the advisory board for, I don't know, if I'm in year 10 or something like that now, or something close to that, I can tell you that the town has been taking these steps. We came before a town meeting 2 years ago for a bond authorization bill to do just this kind of stuff. And in that bond authorization bill, we looked at things like the library roof, and we looked at the DPW building, and we looked at the town hall. In fact, as part of leading up to that, I too went from stem to stern, or in this case, top to bottom, crawling underneath the jail cells and looking at the crumbling infrastructure of that building. What I saw looked like a Massachusetts bridge. Thank God some of them now are getting fixed, but that's what we're looking at. Also, as part of that authorization bill, it allows us to do this kind of study. And not just to look at the town hall, but really to look at all of the functions, like the library and the council on aging and the school system. Adding the financial piece of this study, well, maybe it might tell us something in terms of what just got talked about, whether it be K to 7, K to 8, 7 to 12. Maybe some of that financial study that we find out will be ways to mitigate that cost. We do know what the cost of the town hall renovations will likely be. We just had a study, AI3 I think came in and did that, and it's something about $22 to $24 million. That will need to be bonded. We're not going to get 71% from the state to do that. So how are we going to do that? Whether that is through debt exclusion or not, or we don't go with that and we find a different way to go, we don't know that. But I will say that I think the town has done a lot of work towards that. And again, it's not 100% complete. I know there's going to be more work that needs to be done in order to figure these things out. I do love, though, hearing a different feel tonight than last week. I heard a lot of us, them. I'm hearing a lot of us today. That is great. I applaud us all for that. It's really great. I would encourage the school committee, because this is your decision. There are 5 of you, and only you can make this decision. I would encourage you, though, to allow a third party to come in and take a look at that and settle everyone in town's feeling. Because I'm telling you, there are folks out there in town that will not trust this. They should, but they will not. And if spending a little bit of money, and I don't like spending money of the town because one of the reasons I'm on the advisory board, to kind of watch that check and balance. If we spend a little bit of money to get satisfactory answers from those folks, I think it will go a long way for us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clinton. If there's no one else in here, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Terrell, and then I think Phil as
Is
well.
there anyone else? I'll wait till after Phil does. I'd like to.
I'll wait till after you go.
We're all going to go. So.
Arm wrestle. I was going to say we should all leave, but go ahead. No, I was just going to, I'll go first if it makes you comfortable. I was going to say, first of all, thank you to the administrators. I want to say thank you, first of all, to the superintendent, the administrators, the school committee. Obviously, this is a subject that requires a lot of analysis and in-depth look, and I appreciate the fact that people are trying to do a great job at looking at it. I think the presentations were very informative, and I think the fact that we're all here trying to look at an important issue in kind of at a policy level and trying to talk to each other in the proper fashion is very encouraging. So I just want to thank the superintendent for having your staff out here tonight, and the school committee for allowing the staff to come out and play.
You're welcome.
I bet they are.
Here at 9:30.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the meeting, I made an omission. Matt Gillis is our business manager, and he certainly contributed to the presentation. You were not sitting in a line with the others, Matt, so I failed to recognize you. Pardon me. I'm delighted that everyone listened to our presentation, and thank you for the comments saying that you didn't know this happened in the schools, you didn't know this happened, and I really listened carefully to the comments of everyone. When we were working on our presentation, we did have an opportunity to respond to some of the capital planning's, some of the requests for other suggestions. I thought it was the committee. I don't really know who was making those, whether it was the committee or individual members of the committee, for other suggestions. So we came up with some options that the capital planning committee or others in town may want to suggest, that we may want to think about, see if any of these options offer a solution. I don't know. I've never run a town hall. I don't know what the requirements are, just as education is near and dear to my heart. So what I'd like to say to you all is, over and over again, but it's never been done formally, certainly been done many times publicly and informally, the school department acknowledges that we have extra space. We acknowledge that the town has some needs. And the offer of the current school administration wing remains open. That could certainly house many town offices. The part linked to Hull, was previously Hull Family Network, that classroom, I'm not sure that's still an option because of the requirement to provide a program for students who have been suspended, excluded, expelled. Because that classroom there can be locked off and the students do not have access to the rest of the Jacobs School. The entire area where the school administration area is in that one classroom, that footprint and that square footage is very similar in size to the library. So it's a substantial amount of space. But the offer that would include that one classroom, that part probably doesn't exist. But the entire administration wing, that offer exists. And I think it's a reasonable offer, and I think it would give the town some relief, perhaps temporary relief. I don't know if there's a solution with the DCR properties. I don't know if there's a solution, but there could be a solution with the HRA property. Is there a solution at Hadassah Way? I certainly think so. Right now, the town of Hingham is offering a 5-modular classroom unit that the superintendent of schools told me 2 weeks ago. The classrooms are in excellent condition. They're air-conditioned. They did not have the bad history with the modular classrooms that we did. Each classroom is over 900 square feet. Each classroom could be divided and make 3 offices, I believe. So you have the potential for 15 offices right there. Could that modular unit go in the Hadassah Way parking lot? This would provide temporary relief, perhaps permanent relief. Could it be linked to other school properties? It does have to be attached to an existing building because of the sewerage issues. The rest of it, the electricity and those other issues could be addressed, but because of sewerage, it has to be attached to an existing building. Should the town, is there a solution here? Should the town determine the fair market value of the current town hall, the library, if the library were to move into the administration wing, and other previously identified surplus town-owned property? I sat through those meetings when we were looking at town-owned property. Should we determine what that fair market value is? Is there a solution there? Is there a solution if you start looking at the electronic storage of town documents? Would you need less space? Can some town hall functions be made virtual? I don't know the answer to this, but last Wednesday it was, please come up with other suggestions. So we offer these as suggestions for things to be considered. I particularly suggest the Hadassah Way solution. We were in that building. I don't know if it's available. Every day when I drive by, it sure looks available. It's shuttered down. And with Hadassah Way, a lease there, taking the 5 modular units from Hingham, of course there's a cost to move them, plopping them in the parking lot there. I think the people in that area might be pleased if their parking lot were filled with modular classrooms instead of parking. We could be solving a lot of problems here. And then by looking at the fair market value, would that revenue provide the money to lease Hadassah Way? I don't know. I offer it as a solution, or a possible, not a solution, something that you should consider as a possible solution. We've looked at our solution, and you heard the educators, the trained educators, saying, we don't think that's good for school children. Over and over, I say, we do have extra space. That extra space, in my view, does not come as a whole building in terms of the Memorial School. So I'd like to thank everyone. I do have this, and I'll leave them on the table if people want these suggestions. We'll also put that up on our web tomorrow. And thank you so much for coming tonight.
David, do you want to adjourn your board?
Yeah, sure. Who wants to make a motion to adjourn the school committee meeting? Motion by Mr. Hipp, second by Ms. Peters. All those in favor? Aye.
I'll also entertain a motion. I'll make the motion. Second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Yeah, we're thinking though. What's that? Make baby steps, right?